Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the regular meeting of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors for Tuesday, October 18th, 2016. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Thank you, Madam President. Supervisor Avalos. Avalos present. President Breed.
Here.
Breed present. Supervisor Campos. Campos present. Supervisor Cohen.
Present.
Cohen present. Supervisor Farrell.
Present.
Farrell present. Supervisor Kim. Kim present. Supervisor Marr. Marr not present. Supervisor Peskin.
Present.
Peskin present. Supervisor Tang. Supervisor Tang.
Supervisor Tang.
Tang present. Supervisor Wiener.
Present.
Wiener present. Supervisor Yee. Supervisor Yee.
Present.
Yee present. Madam President, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, can you please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you, Madam Clerk. Are there any communications?
There are none to report, Madam President.
Colleagues, are there any changes to the board meeting minutes of September 6th or September 13th? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve those minutes? Motion by Supervisor Campos, seconded by Supervisor Tang. Colleagues, can we take that without objection? Without objection, those meeting minutes will be approved after public comment. Okay, Madam Clerk, can you please go to our first item?
The first item of business is the special order at 2 p.m. for the mayor's appearance before the board.
Colleagues, can I entertain a motion, since there are no questions, to excuse the mayor from question time? Moved by Supervisor Farrell, seconded by Supervisor Peskin. Colleagues, can we take that without objection? Without objection, the mayor is excused. Next item, please.
The consent agenda, these items are 1 and 2. These items are considered routine. If a member objects, an item may be removed and considered separately.
Okay, seeing no names on the roster, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
On items 1 and 2, Supervisor Campos. Campos, aye. Supervisor Cohen. Aye. Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell.
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener. Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos. Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. There are 11 ayes.
Those items are finally passed unanimously. Next item, please.
Item 3 is an ordinance to waive the competitive process requirement of Administrative Code Section 28.173 for a lease agreement between Amora International, Inc. and the city for an interim employee cafe at Airport Terminal 1.
Roll call vote.
On item 3, Supervisor Campos. Campos, aye. Supervisor Cohen. Cohen, no. After the roll call. Supervisor Cohen.
No.
Cohen, no. Supervisor Farrell.
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim.
Aye.
Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener. Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos. Avalos, no. Avalos, no. Supervisor Breed.
No.
Breed, no. There are 8 ayes and 3 noes with Supervisors Cohen, Avalos, and Breed in the dissent.
The ordinance finally passes. Supervisor Campos.
Yes, I'd like to rescind that vote.
Supervisor Campos has made a motion to rescind, seconded by Supervisor Peskin. Colleagues, can we take that without objection? Without objection, the vote has been rescinded. Madam Clerk, on item number 3, can you please call the roll?
Supervisor Campos.
No.
Campos, no. Supervisor Cohen. Cohen, no. Supervisor Farrell.
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim.
Aye.
Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr. Marr, aye. Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener. Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos. Avalos, no. Supervisor Breed.
No.
Breed, no. There are 7 ayes and 4 noes with Supervisors Campos, Cohen, Avalos, and Breed in the dissent.
The ordinance is finally passed. Item number 4.
Item 4 is a resolution to retroactively authorize the Sheriff's Department to enter into a fourth amendment to the existing month-to-month contract with Global Tellink for inmate telephone service and reducing the call rates and fees for inmate telephone calls per Federal Communications Commission's regulation, and to modify the commission paid to the Sheriff's Department.
Roll call vote.
On item 4, Supervisor Campos.
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell.
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener. Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos. Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. There are 11 ayes.
The resolution is adopted unanimously. Item number 5.
Item 5 is a resolution to approve the Second Amendment to the revenue agreement between Public Works and J.C. Deco San Francisco for the automatic public toilet and public service kiosk program, and to extend the term by 1 year for a total agreement term through October 17th, 2017.
Supervisor Peskin.
Roll call, please.
All right, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
On item 5, Supervisor Campos.
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell.
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, no. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Peskin.
No.
Peskin, no. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener.
No.
Wiener, no. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos. Avalos, no. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. There are 7 ayes and 4 noes, with Supervisors Kim, Peskin, Wiener, and Avalos in the dissent.
The resolution is adopted. Item 6.
Item 6 is a resolution to authorize the Department of Public Health to submit an application to continue to receive funding for the Ryan White Act HIV/AIDS Emergency Relief Program grant from the Health Resources Services Administration, and to request approximately $16.7 million in HIV emergency relief program funding for the San Francisco eligible metropolitan area through February 28, 2018.
Roll call vote.
On item 6, Supervisor Campos.
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell.
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener. Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos. Aye. Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. There are 11 ayes.
The resolution is adopted unanimously. Next item.
Item 7 is referred without recommendation from the Government Audit and Oversight Committee. It's an ordinance to appropriate $100,000 from the General Reserve to the Department of Emergency Management to provide relief to earthquake victims in Italy for fiscal year 2016 through 17.
Supervisor Farrell.
So, colleagues, I know that there was a tragedy that happened in Italy. As someone who has some very, very close friends, I have certainly heard about it. But I do not believe that San Francisco should be in the business of providing financial assistance for every tragedy or natural disaster that happens around the world, as tempting as it is. I fully support and have personally contributed to individual philanthropic efforts here in San Francisco to aid those victims. But to me, this is a mistake. Most importantly, what are we doing in terms of a slippery slope here? What about the Syrian refugee crisis? What about the ISIS bombings in Europe this past summer? And the list can go on and on and on. And whether it's $100,000 or $100 million, the point is still the same. I don't believe the city of San Francisco should be in this business, as tempting as it might be. I think it's the wrong thing to do, because I can think of many other things that the city of San Francisco needs on our streets and on our sidewalks and in our budget every single year that we should be spending the money on, as opposed to giving it abroad.
Thank you, Supervisor Farrell. Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you, Madam President, colleagues. First of all, I think we're all aware of what happened on August the 24th in the nation-state of Italy, but here we are the day after the 27th anniversary of the Loma Prieta earthquake, and here we are on the 100th anniversary of these chambers built after the 1906 earthquake and fire. After the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake, San Francisco benefited from contributions from individuals, organizations, cities, and nation states from around the world. This has been part of a long trajectory where San Francisco, an earthquake-prone city, has recognized the fact that the world rallied for San Francisco in 1989. And indeed, the tradition of coming to the aid of cities around the planet started long before I was on the board the last time. This has been done for cities in China by the Board of Supervisors in the late 1990s. It was done for El Salvador. It was done for Gujarat in India, all of them the result of earthquakes. This is part of a proud tradition. I submit to all of you, what comes around goes around. We should remember 100 years later and 27 years later that the world took care of San Francisco in its time of need. And given that we have a $9.6 billion budget, this appropriation is nowhere as large as some of the appropriations that I have just referred to, which in times when we had a much smaller budget were as large as $250,000. But vote your conscience. I think the nation-state of Italy and the proud Italian-American tradition of San Francisco warrant this vote.
Thank you, Supervisor Peskin. Supervisor Campos.
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate what Supervisor Farrell is saying, but I do think that as a city, we have to recognize that we don't live in a vacuum, that in fact we are connected to other parts of the world. And that one of the things that comes with being a city-state, a city in the year 2016, is to step forward and actually help other parts of the world when they are going through a tough time, including a natural disaster. And the idea is that other cities will do the same for when if that time comes, when we find ourselves in that position. And I think that's, to me, that's appropriate. I think that it's a gesture that is consistent with who we are as the city of St. Francis. And I think that I would have an issue if the amount involved was much larger. But I think it's more of a symbol that we recognize that we're part of a larger world and that in some respects we are connected to our brothers and sisters in other parts of the world.
Thank you, Supervisor Campos. Supervisor Cohen.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Colleagues, particularly to the maker of this appropriation, I think I'm in a little bit of a conflict. I see it as more of a nuanced position, one that possibly could be helpful if you gave some clarification. Do we give aid only in the instance of an earthquake, or have we given aid whenever a member has requested aid be given to a country? Supervisor Peskin, I'm going to direct my question towards you. You may have the most institutional knowledge. Madam President.
Supervisor Peskin.
Through the President to Supervisor Cohen, to my knowledge, all of the instances of the city of San Francisco bestowing largesse upon other cities have been in the instance of earthquakes and only earthquakes, not other major disasters to my knowledge.
Thank you. That's very helpful because as I reviewed this appropriation and the language, what came to my mind was the devastation of Haiti. And many of the...
We did Haiti.
You did Haiti before. Was it for an earthquake or was it for a natural disaster? Hold on a minute before, let me just finish, Supervisor Avalos, and I'd love to hear your answer. Where I am is I'm wondering if I could feel comfortable if we did it for earthquakes and we kind of set a precedent for earthquakes. Okay, I think that there is some kindred sister city synergy happening there. But then my question is if it's not for earthquakes, perhaps we need to develop some kind of a process around what's the criteria that we're using to evaluate where, when, and more importantly, how much. I do see Supervisor Farrell's position, and when I think of the homeless crisis, I see that as a huge disaster. I mean, we certainly could use $100,000 to assist us, but I don't want to use that necessarily as an excuse. I'm just really trying to better understand what past boards have done, and if at all possible, maybe we need to set up a protocol and a standard. That way, it doesn't. Sometimes our actions can come across as heavy-handed or favoritism. Madam Chair, may I ask Supervisor Avalos to answer? Thank you.
Supervisor Avalos?
Thank you. And through the chair, we've done a number of appropriations from our general fund reserve to respond to natural disasters. Earthquakes have not been the only instances of that. There have also been hurricanes and typhoons. We responded to a hurricane in 2007, Hurricane Felix, that hit Honduras and Nicaragua very hard, and I think we committed about $200,000. The funds that went to these parts of the regions actually were not channeled directly through the Red Cross, but through organizations on the ground that actually enabled communities to build wells and have appropriate technology for their continuation, and it was very successful. We actually had monitoring that went down to look at how that was being done. Larissa Casillas, who worked in the mayor's office, had gone down to do that. We also, I recall, we had in December of 2004 or New Year's Day 2005, there was the tsunami that hit Thailand, and we committed some money to that as well. There was an attempt to do a larger amount. Actually, the board committed to a smaller amount.
Do you recall what that amount was?
I believe it was asked for $1 million, and maybe it was like $250,000 that went out. I don't recall. It was a long time ago. For Hurricane Haiyan that hit the Philippines in 2013, we had committed, I don't recall the amount, but it was probably around $200,000. And that did not go through the Red Cross, but again went to organizations that were working on the ground, that were actually the dollars that we had enabled to go to these places had the maximum benefit for people on the ground, who are dealing with the impact. Sometimes we send our dollars through organizations, and organizations take a lot of administrative money for their administrative processes. So we have a history of doing it. I don't think we have a set format for doing it. I think where we've been most successful in having the greatest impact in our dealing with or supporting communities that are suffering from natural disasters is we make sure that there are organizations that are well respected in those countries, not always the government of those countries, that are actually on the ground making sure those monies are used appropriately.
Thank you. I appreciate that that history lesson. It's nice to have some institutional knowledge on the board. Although helpful, it don't necessarily bring me to a position where I think I'm ready to do cast a yes vote. I would, again, I want to reiterate that perhaps that we develop a process, and if there is a process and I'm unaware of it, please also let me know, Supervisor Peskin, but a process for us to vet how much money, what type of a natural disaster warrants a contribution from the city and county of San Francisco. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Cohen. And Supervisor Avalos, you had your name on the dais and I removed it, but you were responding to a question.
It was pretty much to respond to that question, that we do have a history, and it's actually been very successful from the point of view of the places that we're trying to get money to and support.
Thank you. Supervisor Farrell.
Thank you, President Beard. I won't belabor the point. I appreciate the comments and how it's well spent. I would simply suggest that this is more appropriate for individuals to contribute to. We can do it individually as supervisors or people in our community and work to have philanthropic efforts in our neighborhoods to support issues such as this. And despite some of the comments, we are not a nation state in San Francisco. We are not a city state at all, and we're not the federal government, and this should not be what we're doing as a city.
Thank you. And seeing no names on the roster, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
On item 7, Supervisor Campos. Aye. Campos, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
No.
Cohen, no. Supervisor Farrell. Farrell, no. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Tang?
No.
Tang, no. Supervisor Wiener?
Aye.
Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee?
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos?
Aye.
Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed?
No.
Breed, no. There are 7 ayes and 4 noes with Supervisors Cohen, Farrell, Tang, and Breed in the dissent.
Okay, the ordinance is passed on the first reading. Before we go to item number 8, we do have 2:30 commendations, and it is my understanding that we have 2 today. So at this time, I'd like to recognize Supervisor Campos for the first commendation.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And it is indeed my honor today to present this commendation to ODC. And I know that there are some representatives of ODC. If you can please come on up. If you can come on up to the podium, please. And let me just make a couple of brief comments. Over the past 40 years, ODC, which is celebrating its Ruby anniversary, which is why I'm wearing red, and everyone in my office is wearing red today. ODC, for the last 40 years, has transformed the local, regional, and national dance landscape through its year-round presenting and mentorship programs. In 1976, Brenda Way and the then Overland Dance Collective, now formerly known as ODC, rented a space at 223 Mississippi Street and began presenting local artists that they identified as thought leaders and creative change makers. In 1979, ODC was evicted from its site on Mississippi Street, and the company took a giant leap by purchasing a former hardware store on Shotwell and 17th to be its new home. This early investment secured ODC's legacy in San Francisco and specifically in the Mission District. ODC's definition of dance embraces both the fervent amateur and the lifelong professional. Today, their 2-building creative campus is home to ODC Dance, a world-class dance company, and ODC School, a training school for dancers and movers of all levels and ages. It's also home to a fully subsidized Healthy Dancers Clinic, a cafe, a Pilates center, and of course, the recently renovated state-of-the-art ODC Theater, which is just gorgeous. ODC School continues to provide opportunities for people of all ages and abilities to experience the joy of movement. Open 365 days a year, ODC School offers more than 200 classes in a variety of genres for youth, teens, and adults, ranging from recreational to professional dancers. The professional company ODC Dance continues to produce new work that reflects the aesthetic and social values of its 3 resident choreographers, Brenda Way, KT Nelson, and Kimi Okada. The company tours nationally and internationally. It's known for its inventive and inclusive outreach activities. Since 1976, ODC Theater has been the mobilizing force behind the countless San Francisco artists and the foothold for national and international touring artists seeking debut in the Bay Area. The theater, founded by Brenda Way, has earned its place as a cultural incubator by dedicating itself to creative change makers, those leaders who give our region its unmistakable definition and flair. So with that, I'd like to call out Brenda Way, founder and artistic director of ODC, to say a few words.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Supervisor Campos, for inviting us here today. Thank you for everyone who's wearing a little red in honor of us, including the flag. That was very touching. And before I say the words, I would like to, since we have a captive audience, do a little dance. I'd like to thank Mia Chong and Daniel Santos for dancing for us tonight. And if you come to the theater, you can see that bottom half of those dancers, those of you sitting back there. I came to San Francisco 40 years ago, lured by the art and the nature. The nature remains extraordinary, but the art is under siege here. This city, that has been known for so many decades for its imagination, creativity, and innovation in the arts, is facing a crisis. Due to high costs, artists are leaving in droves, and young talent can no longer afford to move here. The result of this will be felt for generations. We are at risk of losing one of our defining features, one that draws attention, enthusiasm, and celebration from around the world, our dazzling and diverse cultural life. I hope and urge all of you as leaders in our community to seek out the artists in your district. I'm sure some of you have. To celebrate their remarkable diversity, go see their work, brag about it, bring your families and friends, and, may I say it, contribute. That is the very heart of leadership, in my view, setting a standard of interest and engagement for your constituency. And finally, I couldn't be an artist if I didn't mention Proposition S. To homeless children, this infusion of funds could be a matter of life and death. And to others, to artists, it is a matter of stay or leave, and we get to choose. I hope you can appreciate the powerful importance of this proposition and what this support could mean to our common future, yours, ours, and our children, and I have 4 of them. I care. I urge you to stand up for this. The results will be our common legacy and our great pride. Henry Thoreau once wrote, "Work and learn in evil days, in insulted days, in days of debt and depression. Fight best in the shade of the cloud of arrows." As artists and humanists in this town, we are fighting in that shade, and we need you to join us. Please do. Thank you.
Thank you for that dance.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Now everyone's going to break out in a dance musical all over the chamber. Thank you, ODC, for your commitment to San Francisco and your years of service to the arts community. You are an amazing dance company. Thank you and congratulations. Okay. With that, I'd like to recognize Supervisor Katie Tang for a commendation.
All right, thank you, colleagues. I'm very excited today to welcome to our board chamber not a one-time, two-time, but a 3-time Olympian who is here from San Francisco, Shannon Roberry. Welcome. So Shannon Roberry, she is a 5th-generation native San Franciscan who grew up in the Sunset District and attended St. Stephen's, Sacred Heart, and Duke University before returning to San Francisco. And at Sacred Heart in high school, Shannon was already a standout runner and was the national high school champion in the 800 meters and a 2-time California State High School champion in the 800 meters and 1600 meters. And she was also inducted into the Sacramento Meet of Champions Hall of Fame and the San Francisco Prep Hall of Fame in 2008. So bear with me, there's lots of recognitions here. Shannon continued her success at Duke University, where she set a school record for the mile in the indoor track season as a freshman, was the 4th Blue Devil woman to earn indoor All-America honors at the NCAA championships in the mile during her sophomore year, anchored Duke's victorious distance medley relay team during her junior year, and helped Duke place 3rd at the NCAA cross-country championships during her senior year. And during her senior year, Shannon also set personal best times and bettered school records in the 800, 1500, 3,000, 5,000 meters, and steeplechase races. She also became the first Duke woman to win the NCAA Indoor Track and Field Championship in the mile in 2007. So as I mentioned, Shannon is a 3-time Olympian, having competed in 2008 in Beijing, 2012 in London, and 2016, most recently, in Rio. And actually, with the results of the 2012 London Olympics under review, Shannon could stand to receive a silver or bronze medal, which would make her the first American woman to medal in the women's 1,500 meters. Shannon is a two-time World Championships bronze medalist from 2009 and 2016, and she holds 3 American records and 1 world record. And she has also, as if that wasn't enough, she has been ranked in the top 10 in the world for nearly a decade, and is also one of only 2 women in world history to have broken 2 minutes in the 800 meters, 4 minutes in the 1,500 meters, and 14:40 in the 5K. And I know that Shannon is a huge role model to many San Francisco student runners. And she was so gracious enough a couple weeks ago to come out to the Sunset District, where we launched a new Sunset Fitness Zone along Sunset Boulevard, where she tried out some of our outdoor fitness stations as we are trying to encourage people to exercise in our outdoors. And what's really exciting is to know that Shannon, being someone from San Francisco, she is jogging along our paths and our roads and our streets and our parks of our city, and actually enjoys it. And I find that to be truly amazing. And another fun fact that I learned when we met her a couple of weeks ago was that my former cross-country and track coach, Andy Leong, once coached her high school coach, Andy Chan, who I believe is here, as well as some other students from Sacred Heart. Welcome to our chamber. And thank you all for being here today. And of course, before I turn it over to you, Shannon, I have some remarks from Supervisor Scott Wiener, since I know that you are a resident of his district right now. And also we have from Assemblymember Phil Ting's office, Ami Alden is also here to speak on his behalf. So with that, Supervisor Wiener.
Supervisor Wiener.
Thank you, Madam President. Shannon, I just wanted to congratulate you again for your just amazing feats and for representing our city and our community so admirably, and we are neighbors as well. We live very close to each other, and so thank you for giving me the honor to represent you at the Board of Supervisors. I'm also a fellow Blue Devil. I think I was there a little bit before you were, but go Blue Devils. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Ami Alden. I'm the Deputy District Director for State Assembly Member Phil Ting, and I want to thank Supervisor Tang for inviting our office to join in the commendations for Shannon. For Assemblymember Phil Ting, your accomplishments is a fantastic achievement, not only for San Francisco, but for the entire state of California. Assemblymember Ting was particularly happy to honor you because besides representing San Francisco in the Assembly, he's also the parent of 2 young daughters who are growing up right here in San Francisco like you did. You're a role model for them. You're a role model for my 2 boys who can look at you and see this is what a champion looks like. This is what an athlete looks like. We're so proud to honor you today on behalf of the California State Assembly, as well as on behalf of the Board of Supervisors.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Alden.
I won't speak long, but first of all, thank you so much. I can't believe I'm standing here right now. As a 5th-generation San Franciscan, this is a huge honor to be here. I never thought as a little girl, first dancing, then playing soccer, then running all across the city, that I would find myself in this spot right now. But I discovered running through my runs in Golden Gate Park, and I found my passion at Kezar Stadium. And even though my life takes me all over the world these days for competition, I have such a strong sense of home. San Francisco has really molded me into the woman that I am. It's a city where I never thought I couldn't accomplish something because I was a woman. And through every stage of the process, I've been supported. Even today, having my high school coach, he's gone to every world championship I've been to. He brought some of his athletes, the athletic director. I have the support of my high school. My husband and my family is here. It's a city that it may be one of the best and biggest cities in the world, but it feels so small and so loving, and it's an honor for me to represent San Francisco every time I toe the line in a race. So thank you so much for this honor. I really grateful for it.
Congratulations. And you'd be happy to know that we have redone the track at Kezar. Thank you. Supervisor Cohen.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, Supervisor Marr. Supervisor Marr, you have a commendation? Supervisor Marr.
So let me first say it's great to have athletes, artists, and dancers honored, the 100 years of supervisors and others in this building. The next honoree is a special strategic planner for our whole region, and I wanted to ask if Mr. Ezra Rapport from the Association of Bay Area Governments can come forward. I also see Miriam Chin, Dwayne Bay, Jillian Adams, and others here. If you want to come forward too with Ezra, but thank you for being here, the staff of ABAG. Ezra Rapport is a visionary, and I just wanted to say that the slogan of Plan Bay Area is building on a legacy of leadership, and I just wanted to say we're building a future of our region based on the leadership of Ezra Rapport and the amazing staff of ABAG. Ezra Rapport has made tremendous contributions to sustainability and resilience in our whole San Francisco Bay Area region. His efforts have been to expand dialogue and real voice of our 101 cities and our 9 counties of this 7 million person, soon to be 9 million people by 2040, Bay Area ecosystem that we live in. Ezra has championed regional equity in his work. He has retired as of earlier this month, but his tenure on ABAG will be remembered because of his work to develop a regional plan, a vision that is supporting the housing efforts for San Francisco and so many other cities and areas, as well as a vision of each of our cities in the whole region. Even when he faced major health issues, Ezra has demonstrated this strong commitment to our Council of Governments, our Association of Bay Area Governments, as a solid democratic foundation for our development of the future. I did want to say after the passage of 2008's SB 375, pushing our cities and counties to work towards sustainable community strategies, Ezra really worked with the staff to really empower our whole region, not just the big cities of San Jose, San Francisco, and Oakland, but the small towns and the whole region working together as one for our whole region. The staff of ABAG are notorious for great studies, projections, research, but I think it's data with a heart, and that's because of Ezra's leadership, tying our housing needs to transportation and job needs as well. I also wanted to just acknowledge that as we move forward to our Plan Bay Area 2040, I will really miss Ezra, his advice on health issues for my own family, and just the kind of work with a heart to plan for the future of our communities. Please join me in acknowledging, as we will vote later on Ezra Rapport Day in San Francisco, but to thank Ezra and the Association of Bay Area Governments for their legacy of leadership. Ezra.
Thank you. This is a great honor for me. I never expected this. I have had a career where I mostly just keep my head down because I know that's the way you get things done, but apparently my head got too high this time. I want to say that San Francisco has become much more progressive since I first moved to California, and it's really an honor to be here with you. I would just hope that you would keep your eye as well on the regional institutions that exist, because it doesn't all happen right here, of course. You're the capital of a very large, diverse, economically powerful region, and you need good, strong institutions to help support the idea that we're going to have regional economic development and equitable outcomes and housing throughout the entire region. So to do that correctly, you need to make sure that the institutions that are responsible for regional governance are strong and independent and can take in the issues that you need to resolve. Right now, we've reorganized regional governance so that in the first step, the staffs of the Transportation Commission and ABAG have been consolidated. But the second part of that is left undone, which is that we need a governance model that looks at regional issues beyond transportation. We can't have all the regional issues reporting to a transportation commission. That type of structure does not make a lot of sense for a region as complicated as this one. So therefore, the agreement was that there would be new governance models put forth that would address these larger regional issues. But that's not going to happen on its own. It requires the participation of leadership like yours to look at what's the best way to do that. We can't expect the Transportation Commission to reorganize itself. It requires a look from the outside to know what would be the best thing to do for the Bay Area. So to that end, I hope you take that challenge seriously. I know Supervisor Campos was in the middle of that and said very forcefully that we had to get a merger of governance as part of this overall deal. I'm leaving the ABAG responsibility, but what I leave behind is an undone task of making sure that our regional governance continues so that we can look at all the issues that the Bay Area faces, and San Francisco needs that to happen for it to ultimately be successful. Thank you.
Thank you. And before we provide you with your certificate of honor, I'd like to acknowledge Supervisor Campos, and then Supervisor Avalos would also like to say a few words.
Thank you. And I won't belabor the point other than to simply say that it's been an honor to work with you. I haven't worked directly with you as a member of ABAG, but I have benefited from your work and your wisdom as a member of the MTC. And as a resident of the San Francisco Bay Area, I want to say thank you and your team, but thank you in particular for the fact that you have made the issue of equity, the issue of housing affordability, a priority in this region. And I think that without your voice, we would not be where we are. As far as we still have to go, I think that there's a great deal of gratitude that millions of people in this Bay Area owe to you because of the fact that you have made that a priority. And I certainly am committed, as I think are the rest of us, to making sure that we do right by the San Francisco Bay Area. So thank you very much, Ezra. We're going to miss you, but hopefully we'll still have you around to tell us what else needs to be done.
Thank you, Supervisor Campos. Supervisor Avalos.
Thank you, Madam President. And Ezra, it's really great to see you here. And I spent 2.5, maybe 3 years on ABAG. Also served on the administrative committee as well. And since then, I moved on to the Air District, and so that was my trajectory in regional government. And I just want to say thank you for you and your staff for your work. It really informed how I approach my work in my district. I live in a part of San Francisco that hasn't seen a lot of development, but it's given me the opportunity to look at how we can make development happen in a really community-centered way, in a sustainable way, and the sustainable community strategy was a big part of that. We have a huge priority development area in my district that now we have a bond funds committed to for 100% affordable housing right next to transit at Balboa Station. We've also been able to link up corridors for transit to hook up into this area, and all of that has been informed by the work that I was involved with you and your staff at ABAG, and so that's made a tremendous impact. In the years to come, it will have a tremendous impact on the southern part of San Francisco, a place that hasn't really had its equitable distribution of resources, and just want to say thank you, and that is a tremendous legacy for you and your staff to looking back on to see how you've committed these resources to our area. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Avalos. Supervisor Kim.
I just want to add my word of thanks and gratitude for your many, many years of public service and commitment to regional planning, which, as you noted and is noted here, is not easy work to do. But I just want to commend your leadership and, of course, your incredibly hardworking staff. It's really been a pleasure to serve on ABAG with you.
Thank you. Supervisor Wiener.
Thank you, Madam President. As I just want to also say thank you for your service. Although I, like Supervisor Campos, have served on MTC, not on ABAG, obviously the two agencies have worked closely together. And even though there have certainly been many agreements and some disagreements over the years, that's the nature of regional work. We all sort of end up working it out in the end because we have to. And I am very appreciative of your service and your collaboration over the years. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Oh, so what is this, like the Cool Kids Club?
Yes.
Thank you. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, John.
Thank you again for your service and congratulations. And with that, I'd like to acknowledge Supervisor Cohen for our last commendation.
Thank you very much, President Breed. Good afternoon, colleagues and members of the public. As you know, this is October, and October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And there is a woman that I'd like to call up, Miss Catherine J. Summers. Please come up to the dais. I had an opportunity to celebrate the 16th annual fundraising event that Miss Catherine Summers has been putting together, as I said, for the last 16 years. And she said something to me that really struck a chord. She told me that she wanted to be recognized, and I thought, that's a good point. She deserves to be recognized. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce you to a woman. Her name is Catherine Summers. She's very passionate when it comes to addressing and educating the local community on breast health and other disparities, particularly after losing her baby sister at an early age to breast cancer. She made a promise to herself that she would do everything possible to assist women, especially African American women, with easing the weight of being a breast cancer survivor. It was a painful experience to watch her sister pass away at the young age of 46. Being her spokesperson, caretaker, and doctor, as Catherine sometimes felt, this life tragedy made her more driven to respond to the help in educating African American women, particularly in the Bayview, Hunters Point community and other surrounding low-income communities. Now, by way of background, Ms. Summers is a retired registered nurse of more than 50 years and was a nursing instructor at City College of San Francisco for over 30 years. She holds a master's in nursing as well as a postmaster's in community mental health. Not only that, but Ms. Catherine is also a Vietnam vet. I actually didn't know that. Thank you for your service. She's been a vigorous member of the National Council of Negro Women Adopt a School program. She's been a founding member of the Bayview Imani Breast Cancer Support Group, a member of the University of California, UCSF Alumni Association. The last 54 years of her life she spent happily married to the love of her life. She has been blessed to be a mother, a grandmother, and a great-grandmother. She has 4 children of her own, three daughters and a son, and she's a grandmother of 8 and a great-grandmother to 4. She loves to stay busy at home, and I can attest she's definitely busy, or sometimes a busybody in the community. But I just want to present this wonderful woman. She's outstanding. She's doing incredible work for the entire breast health community, and I think that we should give her her roses while she's still alive. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome Ms. Catherine Summers.
Thank you, Supervisor Cohen. I am just overwhelmed with this. I do things because I enjoy doing it, but when I told Supervisor Cohen, I said, every time I go somewhere, it's always them, them, them. And I said, I think it's time, being 82 years old and still able to see it, feel it, smell it, that I should have some type of recognition in terms of where I am and who I am. And I really was just joking about it. But I see that she took it to heart, and I really, really appreciate it. Because the thing is that I'm a type of person, I do things because I enjoy doing it. Not that I have to do it or anything. Only thing is when I felt that I had to do something is when I was in the military. You know, you either did what they told you to do or you suffered the consequences. And so after that, I decided that I wanted to come back to Bayview Hunters Point community and do some things that I could do to make a difference. And that's what I set out to do, because when I came there and I felt that there was nothing for the African American women in breast health. And so I took it on my own as an individual to start some program that the women in the Bayview community could have a voice, and that they would have some place that they could go and they could get treatment or just sit down and talk to other women. And I feel that that should be any place that women in the community or anyone should be able to get the service that they need, get the help that they need, and also get the support. Because if you don't have support, then you are left alone doing what you can at the best way that you can. So to be here this afternoon, and it's not so much of receiving, you know, the accolades and everything. It's just to let you know that we in the Bayview Hunters Point community need service, need things like any other community. And it's my desire and it's my ambition to continue to work in the Bayview, in the other communities, as long as I can, and as long as God gives me the strength and help, I'm going to continue to do for the Bayview Hunters Point community and other communities in terms of helping women and individuals to get what they need and go forth and do the things that they feel comfortable in doing. So I want to thank Supervisor Cohen from the bottom of my heart, because I knew her before she became a supervisor, and I said, she's a mover and a shaker. I'm going to rally around her and do anything that I can to help her continue to do the thing that she does. So from the bottom of my heart, I thank you.
Thank you for your service and congratulations. Okay, with that, we will return to the business of the board. And Madam Clerk, where did we leave off?
Item 8.
Okay, let's get to it.
Item 8 is an ordinance to amend the administrative code to create neighborhood property crime units at district stations in the police department.
Supervisor Yee?
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, it's no secret that auto break-ins, home invasions, and burglaries are problems for every single one of our districts. The spike in property crimes is an embarrassment to our world-class city. Our visitors and residents have had enough. We shouldn't be known as the city of break-ins. While we all want to see a change, we need to identify thoughtful tactics that would utilize our existing resources most effectively and efficiently. Some on this board felt so strongly about this issue that they bypassed the legislative and administrative processes altogether by placing an item on the November ballot to try to address it. I just want to state that what a dangerous precedent this sets when we ask voters to decide on the deployment of public safety departments without strengthening their resources or even vetting the stakeholders. It's bad policy. This is a real disservice to the San Francisco people. But that aside, I believe that every single supervisor here sincerely shares this concern about property crimes and how they affect our communities. It's a rare occasion when we can all agree. In fact, many of us have been the victims of break-ins ourselves, myself included. The residents of San Francisco have also already spoken loud and clear. We don't need to go to the ballot box to create a dedicated unit or to provide property crimes more focused attention. We can push for something better. We can push for something here and now. The ordinance before you today is really a way to forge a more common sense, data-driven community approach to combating neighborhood crimes, more specifically property crimes. I have been working with community members, local captains, and SFPD on short-term and long-term strategies to reduce property crimes and to invest in more resources to support both community-based prevention and the SFPD. Our legislative process provides us the opportunity to engage with stakeholders, community members, local police captains, and the police commission to create something that can work. While I believe having a centralized unit on property crimes at the San Francisco Police Department could be helpful, I am also concerned about what that will mean for our local precincts. We want to keep the officers who know the neighborhood and are most familiar with the community members. The ordinance before you today is more flexible and neighborhood-focused, which was the original intent of the version set to the ballot. Crime trends change over time and can be different from neighborhood to neighborhood. I want to ensure that every district captain is given the ability to dedicate staffing to data-driven trends within their precincts. I also want to ensure that there is a stronger coordination between divisions and departments so that we can solve investigations more swiftly and curb citywide trends before they even begin. Lastly, we need to work with whoever the new police chief is to address these issues and want us to think more strategically on how to proceed with those that are most familiar with the departments. What's on the ballot is done, and now in the hands of the voters, but that does not mean we cannot do our jobs as legislators to engage stakeholders. I would like to propose a way for us to come together. I look forward to working with all of you to unify and commit to a sensible, thought-out solution and hope that we can take a step by supporting this legislation. I don't think the approaches we are proposing are mutually exclusive. I want to thank my staff, Jen Lowe, and co-sponsor Supervisor David Campos and his staff, Caroline Gosson, for helping us with this legislation. And of course, I want to share my utmost gratitude for the work of our interim chief and the San Francisco Police Department officers who have attempted to do more with less, even under the most difficult circumstances. We have some minor amendments I am proposing today that strengthens the language in the ordinance regarding coordination between the San Francisco Police Department and other departments that are working on investigations. Should I read my amendments in now?
Yeah, that's fine.
So on page 3, line 4 to 6, I wanted to add and improve coordination among different divisions of the department, including but not limited to the Patrol Bureau Task Force and the Crime Analysis Unit. On page 4, line 7, I want to...
One second, Supervisor Yee. Do you, Mr. Gibner, you have a copy of the amendments? Okay.
And the amendments are handed out to the copy that we gave you.
Okay, so you can finish. Thank you.
Okay. Page 4, line 7, add the wording, and with other city departments. Page 5, line 8, add the words, streamlining the sharing of information and data with other city departments responsible for law enforcement, including the District Attorney's Office, to help investigate property crimes in a timely manner. And on page 6, line 7 and 8, add the words, work coordinated with other city departments. Okay, and that's...
Supervisor Yee has made a motion to amend, seconded by Supervisor Campos. Colleagues, can we take the amendments without objection? Without objection, the amendments pass unanimously. Supervisor Yee, is there anything else?
No, that's all. Thank you, Madam President.
Mr. Gibner?
Deputy City Attorney John Gibner, this is an unusual discussion, so I just wanted to add a word of caution to the board as you engage in this discussion. As you know, as Supervisor Yee mentioned, there's a measure on the ballot that deals with similar subject matter. It is fine in this discussion to compare as a factual matter the content of that measure and the content of this ordinance, or to discuss what this ordinance would do if that measure passes or if it fails. But I would just caution the board not to advocate for or against that measure, or advocate for why it is a good thing that the voters should adopt, why it is a bad or troubling thing that the voters should not adopt. But really, when you're discussing that measure, stick to a factual description of it and discuss this ordinance in that context.
And Mr. Gibner, just for clarity, can you answer this? So say, for example, the board passes this and then the voters vote down, the voters vote for the measure on the ballot. That means that the one on the ballot will take precedent over the one we pass here at the board?
To the extent that that ballot measure conflicted with this ordinance, then the ballot measure would trump. But generally, so we would go through kind of line by line and see, can the police department do this and this? Can the police department do that and that? And as a general matter, if the board adopts this ordinance and the voters adopt Prop R, both of them can go into effect. The police would essentially have a citywide neighborhood crime unit and would also have precinct-specific neighborhood property crime units, and we would work with the department to figure out exactly how that would work. Of course, after the election, the board could amend this ordinance by majority vote and could also amend the ballot measure with a 2/3 majority to line them up more specifically. But the short answer is, yeah, they could actually both go into effect.
Okay, and then one question to Supervisor Yee, just for clarity. So, Supervisor Yee, why are we choosing to do this now rather than wait until after the election? I'm just curious.
I introduced this a few months ago, and I couldn't get a waiver on the 30 days, so that's why we're doing it now.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Wiener?
Thank you very much, Madam President. And I will certainly not advocate on behalf of Prop R in any way, but we do need context. I think, frankly, this measure, if you read it, explains perfectly why we went to the ballot instead of going through the Board of Supervisors. This ballot, as I will explain in a moment, really dramatically cuts back on I think the desire of many to address some very real neighborhood public safety issues that go well beyond property crimes. And And so that's why I will not be voting for this measure today. I will note that this measure was not brought forward until after Prop R was placed on the ballot. It's not like we had colleagues who were like, we need to do something about neighborhood property crimes. This was a response to a measure that was placed on the ballot. It was initially completely duplicated verbatim, that language, and it's now been changed to completely gut what that measure would do. A few things to note about this measure. It is completely limited to property crimes. And don't get me wrong, property crimes are incredibly impactful and need to be addressed. Auto break-ins, bike thefts, and so forth. But the neighborhood level crime we're seeing in our city goes well beyond property crimes. For example, the original version of this measure introduced by Supervisor Yee, which replicated Prop R, included threatening behavior and harassment on our streets, which we see every single day. That was stripped out. The original version of this legislation that replicated Prop R tasked these neighborhood police officers from partnering with our Health and Human Services Agency to help transition people off of the street and into shelter and housing. That has been stripped out. So this legislation has completely stripped out the directive that these neighborhood police officers address threatening behavior on our street, behavior that is causing problems for people in neighborhoods, disruptive behavior on our streets, and removes from these officers the directive to partner with our Health and Human Services agencies to transition people out of the encampments into the streets. Colleagues, we all get contacted by constituents all the time about public safety issues and health hazards in our neighborhoods, and our police have a critical role to play. They frequently must do it in partnership with our Health and Human Services agencies to do it in a very humane and compassionate way. But to say that the police should not be involved in these situations, this is a very, very limited and siloed approach to neighborhood crime. It's not just property crime. There are other issues as well. This legislation removes the staffing requirement. In the original version of this legislation, which was a duplicate of Prop R, there was a requirement that once we get to full staffing, 2% of the officers would be assigned to this unit. That is now gone. There is no unit anymore. It's now out of the police stations. So this measure, as amended, is a shadow of the original version, which was a duplicate of Proposition R, and it really it is just not something that I will support, and it's not something that I think most people would support, given the breadth and depth of the neighborhood safety issues that we face as a city. I will also say that Supervisor Yee mentioned in his criticism of the original version of his legislation that was a duplicate of Prop R, that it was somehow not coupled with strengthening the resources of our department. Let me talk about the work we're doing to strengthen the resources of our department. It wasn't so long ago that we only had 1,650 officers, down from 2,000. We now have almost 1,850, and we are working very hard to hit 2,000 officers again. I will also note that not all members of this Board of Supervisors have been supportive of that effort. In the budget last year, members of the Budget Committee, including Supervisor Yee, supported a motion to delay academy classes. A portion of the budget was asked to be put on reserve this year of the police budget, and various members of the board supported that effort. In addition, I authored a resolution to say 2,000 officers, which was a number set 30 years ago, is no longer enough, and 2,200, based on data, is the appropriate number. And a number of members of this board, including Supervisor Yee, voted against it. In terms of these votes, everyone's entitled to their view about police staffing. There are a lot of different views, and I respect everyone's views, even if I disagree with them. But to suggest that this is not coupled with enhancing resources is inaccurate, because a lot of us have been working very, very hard to restaff this department. And in fact, the original version of this legislation, which was a duplicate of Proposition R, would only go into effect once we hit approximately 2,000 officers and have some flexibility in terms of staffing. So I will be voting against this gutted version of a true neighborhood safety measure.
Thank you, Supervisor Weiner. Supervisor Cohen.
Thank you. I just wanted to, lay out a little bit of the key distinctions between the measure and the ordinance, and of course, being careful not to campaign for anything. But I'm just sticking to the facts. So, Supervisor Yee's legislation would require a new unit in each district. I think that's a good thing. While the ballot measure has will have a centralized deployment system. Supervisor Yee's legislation is limited to just property crimes only, and I think that is where you lose me. And the ballot measure has a broader focus, which includes property crimes and quality of life crimes, which better matches the issues, at least from my perspective in District 10, certainly from the southeast corner. We've got quality of life issues and we've got property crime issues. Those are two of the greatest concerns I think people have. And Supervisor Yee's legislation is not triggered once we meet the 1971 level. And again, this is the full staffing level that the charter spells out for us, which begs the question as to whether or not this unit can even be staffed currently. And so the ballot measure comes also into place after we reach the 1971 staffing level. So I think those are the three key points that that distinguishes one initiative from another. So in talking to the folks here today, I think my key message points are pretty simple. In the interest of full disclosure, I was a signatory on the ballot measure, and I will be consistent in my support of the version that's going to voters, and not be supporting this ordinance today. The second point I want to make is that despite the conflicting views that there's a measure on the ballot, that there's a measure already on the ballot, and we're discussing it. So if it passes, if that ballot measure passes, this ordinance will be superseded. So then all this conversation is like null and void. So the conversation and debate is better had after the result of the November election. Something to consider. And then also limiting this unit only to property crimes ignores the quality of life crimes, as I mentioned earlier before, which, again, is called out in the ballot initiative, which frankly has daily and severe and very, very real impacts on all of our districts. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Cohen. Supervisor Campos.
I guess this is the point where we talk about the ballot measure without talking about the ballot measure, and
without campaigning on the ballot measure.
Right. Look, I appreciate the fact that there are different perspectives around this. The fact is that the issue of crime and property crime in particular has been an issue way before anyone here decided to put something on the ballot. A number of us have actually been working on that issue for quite some time. Before anything was actually introduced, I held a hearing where we specifically focused on property crime. And what was interesting about property crime in that discussion, which actually zeroed in on the issue of car break-ins, is how the biggest challenge facing San Francisco is the fact that we're not seeing arrests being made when there are car break-ins. The district attorney made a presentation at that time that actually showed that in San Francisco in 2015 there were 25,000 car break-ins citywide, and there were arrests in only 2% of those break-ins. That, by the way, is a fraction of the national average. So everywhere else, police officers are actually making more arrests when there is a car break-in. That's not the case in San Francisco. And so, to me, what that tells me is that the issue of what's happening with car break-ins and property crime is not just about staffing. That's part of it. But it's not just the number of officers that you have to have. It's actually how you deploy those officers. Because it's not just looking at the number of officers, but actually the number of hours that people are out there on the ground. And so if we want to have a serious conversation about resources, then let's have a serious conversation about resources. And let's talk about that deployment. And I mean, I've had this conversation with our district attorney and other people who could say that, if we're going to talk about how many men and women are out on the street patrolling and dealing with crime, whether it's property crime or something else, it's not enough to look at the number of people in the department. You actually have to look at how they're being deployed. And yet, that's not a conversation that I've seen anyone want to have. So let's have that conversation. But what I appreciate about what Supervisor Yee is doing, and I want to thank him and his staff, Jen Lowe, for all the work that has been going into this, including, by the way, talking to members and former members of the police department who have issues with the ballot box policy setting that the proposition is trying to do. What I appreciate about it is that it's basically saying we as a board are going to act when we can act. And in this case, if we believe that property crime is a priority, we don't need to go to the ballot to make that a priority. We can act today. And that's what this is doing, is actually taking action. And by the way, as a former member of the police commission, I think it's doing something that actually is at the core of community policing, which is actually decentralizing decision-making in the police department so that it's not some bureaucrat in a central office deciding how resources are deployed and what the priorities are for members of the police force, but actually at each level, at each station, each one of the district stations, giving them the flexibility to actually create a strategy that's specific to the needs of that district. So I'm very happy with this, very proud to say to my constituents, you know what, we don't need to wait for the election to take action and to act, and that's what we're doing with this. The other thing I would say in terms of quality of life crime, I have yet to hear an argument that there aren't in place the tools that are needed to actually address those issues. Those are there. There's nothing that precludes law enforcement or anyone else who needs to be involved from doing that. And I can tell you in terms of the issue of property crime, that what we need is actually, we need a more of a focus on property crime in these districts. I know because I've seen it in the Mission, I've seen it in Bernal Heights. We need also more resources given, but it's not just the number of officers, but actually the number of hours that are being spent targeting these kinds of crimes. And then we also need more awareness on the part of the public. We need better education so that there is more prevention on some of these crimes and more activity at the neighborhood level, which is going to take that kind of involvement to actually increase the percentage of arrests, especially in a crime break-in. If we continue the way we are, we're sending the message that in San Francisco you can break into a car without any consequences. We need to change that. This effort by Supervisor Yee is actually the first step in taking action to make that happen. So thank you, Supervisor.
Thank you, Supervisor Campos. Supervisor Kim.
I want to just reemphasize many of the points that Supervisor Campos has just made. One of the reasons why I support the measure that Supervisor Yee has introduced today is that I really believe that it's essential to keep officers that are working on property crime within their neighborhood unit and within their precinct stations. We want to encourage community policing, where our police are focused on the community themselves and not just on specific types of crimes. A centralized unit will pull officers away from neighborhood units where they're already getting to know their small business owners, community leaders, resident leaders, block by block. This is something that I've seen really work in a station like Tenderloin, where our officers and our captain really do get to know all the business owners and property owners and are able to work on community policing versus just criminal activity policing. I think that Supervisor Yee's ordinance here before us today really captures the essence of what actually we here on the board often talk about, that our police are here to serve the community and to be the eyes and ears on the ground. And this really accentuates the best of what I think we have is encouraging our precincts to establish these neighborhood property crime units to focus on an issue that we know has really become rampant over the last couple of years, which is the increase in property crime in particular. So I am
I'm happy to support this ordinance today, and I think a great deal of work went into it as well, so I do want to also recognize Supervisor Yee and his staff.
Thank you. Supervisor Yee.
Thank you. When I did duplicate the file initially, because I thought we could do this legislatively and try to get as many things off the ballot so people didn't have to be flooded with all initiatives. But what happened was I started asking and talking to a bunch of people, including 2 former chiefs and the current interim chief and other captains. I spoke to police commissioners who said they didn't hear about it until it was introduced. And the more I spoke about to people, I realized it wasn't just a duplication that was needed. Sure, we may want to have a centralized unit, but when I talked to the grand jury jurors about this, they said, well, in essence, we have that already with the Patrol Borough Task Force, which is chore to do the same thing as what the ballot initiative is asking. And the jurors were saying what they needed would be more resources. And I agree. Much as what I've amended is from just talking to people and realizing that there's a need in my district and probably several of the districts on the west side. What happens a lot is when things get centralized, then the issues that we are faced with on the west side sometimes doesn't get addressed because something else comes up, and we see this happen over and over again. In fact, one of the former chiefs said that's why they decentralized 20 years ago. So these things that I have the elements that I have in here were not made up. They were actually discussed with people. And the other thing is that with the district or the decentralized smaller units of each police station, what I built in the language was that it should be flexible, that if there are other issues that are more important at the time, then the police captain should have the ability to re-employ them to something else. And I want to set the record straight though about me voting a certain way with a police staffing. If I'm going to vote a certain way, I'll owe up to it. And certainly when there's a comment saying that I voted against or withholding funding for a police academy, that is like so not true. If people remember the vote to put money on reserve for the police department, I actually voted against it, which lost 5-6. So again, if I voted one way, I will let you know that that's true or not. And what was said was not true, and it seems to be said over and over again. I don't know why. I think all you have to do is go back to the record and look at the votes. And so partially what I'm looking at is a way to respond to our greatest needs. It seems like it cuts across all the districts with property crime. And for District 7, and probably, again, several other districts in the west side, that is one of the major issues that we're dealing with. And I want to make sure whatever we reform, it doesn't get lost because something else comes up next week. So, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Yee. Supervisor Wiener.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, thank you for the discussion today. As an initial matter, in the Budget Committee vote last year, it is a matter of public record, and there was a motion to basically put, I believe it was 1 or more police academy classes on ice, and there was a 3-2 vote in committee that we defeated that, but that vote is what it is. I'm not making that up. Anyone can go back and look at the record. It's very clear. I also, there was a statement about how a couple of statements about this is somehow taking police officers away from neighborhood stations. That's not true. This only happens after we significantly increase our police staffing above and beyond what it is today in terms of the original version of this legislation that was modeled on Prop R. And so I just don't think that it's accurate to say that we're somehow trying to pull police officers away from district stations. These will be officers who will be engaged in our neighborhoods doing community policing. So thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Avalos.
Thank you. Just to dispel any misinformation that's put out there was no effort to put on ice any police academy classes. There has been talk about delaying academy classes by a month to find some cost savings, because often the police academy classes are actually delayed a month because they aren't ready yet to go when they're scheduled. But there has been no motion to actually cut police academy classes in many, many years. That was something that happened very commonly before any member of this current Board of Supervisors was on the Board of Supervisors. And so there has been discussions about possibly doing things like this, but we actually haven't. And when I brought this up in the past, I see Supervisor Weiner shaking his head vigorously at me. When I brought this up in the past, it was really about a lot of members of the Budget Committee wanted to find additional funding, and I wanted to float out there the ideas of what you have to do to get more funding to be able to fund projects in your districts, and you have to make decisions, like you have to reprioritize things that you care about, like police academy classes. I floated that idea a couple years ago. No one bid on it. We moved on. But we have been on trajectory over the past several years, and I'd say the past five years, actually, we're adding additional police academy classes to get to the 1,971 authorized strength charter mandate. I also tried a motion to put on reserve, not for police academy classes, but money across the board from the police department to provide us a timeline for how they're going to be implementing reform. It's not about academy classes. It wasn't going to affect the ability of the police department to deploy, despite what they said. It didn't pass. But I just wanted to clear up some of the things that people have been saying that weren't exactly accurate.
Supervisor Yee?
Just a quick comment. I mean, I was going to mention this during roll call, but it's relevant, that I'm actually will be introducing language to form a police staffing task force in the near future.
Supervisor Weiner.
Thank you, Madam President. Just as a reminder, because I believe last year Supervisor Avalos was on the Budget Committee, and although I can't remember exactly, but the motion was not to delay academy class a month, but was to delay one or more academy classes until the entire police department received retraining, which strikes me as a significant period of time. So we want to retrain the police department, so the solution is to not hire new police officers who go through a 7-month academy training that reflects any of our most current thinking on training. So it was a motion that I did not support. That was the motion issue. It was voted down 3-2. Supervisor Yee supported that motion to delay those academy classes. I can't remember if Supervisor Avalos was on Budget Committee. You were last year. Then it might have been Supervisor Kim or Supervisor Marr. I just can't remember who was on. But that was the motion I'm referring to through the chair to Supervisor Avalos.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, on the item, can we please call the roll?
And that's on the item as amended, Madam President.
Yes, thank you.
Supervisor Campos. Campos, aye. Supervisor Cohen. Cohen, no. Supervisor Farrell. Farrell, no. Supervisor Kim.
Aye.
Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Tang.
No.
Tang, no. Supervisor Weiner.
No.
Weiner, no. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos. Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. There are 7 ayes and 4 noes with Supervisors Cohen, Farrell, Tang, and Weiner in the dissent.
The ordinance is passed on the first reading. Next item, please.
Item 9 is an ordinance to amend the administrative code to reflect changes in job classifications in bargaining units.
Roll call vote.
On item...
Supervisor Peskin?
Madam President, I'm sorry to nitpick here, but this was the subject of a mildly interesting, if not funny, meeting wherein on page 30 there was a classification 3246, which is, believe it or not, the city pianists, not one but two of them allegedly, and that actually led to the clerk of the board bringing Mr. Lloyd to play tunes from 1909 to 1919 on the occasion of the 100th anniversary of these exalted chambers. But I came to learn that actually the position of 3246 pianist is not filled at all. And so the policy conversation that we had in and around this administrative code update was fundamentally underpinned by the notion that the city should, whenever and wherever possible, eliminate classifications that are no longer needed and are unoccupied. And it appears, the comments of Ms. Mason from the Department of Human Resources notwithstanding, that these positions are actually not filled and that the individuals playing the piano for the city are actually 3279 rec facilities classifications. So I just want to get a clarification on that, and maybe we should eliminate the position of city pianist, or maybe we should fill it, or maybe those people are working out of class. I think those are the three choices.
So are you going to make an amendment, Supervisor Peskin?
Well, first, if we could hear from Ms. Mason from the Department of Human Resources.
Okay, Ms. Mason.
President Breed, Supervisors, the report I have shows two individuals in the pianist classification of 3246, and my report is a printout from our payroll system. So I would like to confer with whatever staff, and maybe my report was old because this was generated in July when we submitted the report to you, or started the process in submitting it to the mayor. So if that's changed since July 14th, I stand corrected. So,
well, somehow or another, this is an issue of fact, but the people playing the piano said they were 3279 recreation leaders.
And I can research that as well. Again, my printout came from the personnel system, and that's what I have in front of me.
So, Madam President, insofar as this is not a burning issue, I would make a motion to continue this item to our next meeting.
Okay. Supervisor Campos, did you want to speak?
Just a quick question. Just if I may, through the president, through the chair, to maybe Supervisor Peskin or staff, so that I understand. So are there two individuals whose full-time job is to play the piano for the city and county of San Francisco? I just want to understand sort of what we're saying.
I can get you further details on that classification, but it is not my impression they're full-time. I believe they're as-needed employees, but I can get you further detail on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Peskin has made a motion to continue 1 week to the meeting of October 25th, 2016. Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Campos. Colleagues, can we take this without objection? Without objection, the motion to continue to the meeting of October 25th passes. All right, Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Item 10 is an ordinance to authorize the settlement of the bankruptcy claim filed by the city against Mexicana Airlines for approximately $110,000. The bankruptcy case was filed on August 2nd, 2010 in United States Bankruptcy Court for the Southern District of New York, and the city's claim was filed on January 27th, 2015.
Roll call vote.
On item 10, Supervisor Campos. Campos, aye. Supervisor Cohen. Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell. Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener.
Aye.
Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos. Avalos, absent. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. There are 10 ayes.
The ordinance passes unanimously on the first reading. Next item. Oh, Madam Clerk, please call items 11 and 12 and 14 together.
Items 11, 12, and 14 are two resolutions and a motion that respond to the presiding judge of the Superior Court on the findings and recommendations contained in the 2015 through 2016 civil grand jury reports. For item 11, A report entitled San Francisco County Jails, Our Largest Mental Health Facility Needs Attention. For item 12, a report entitled Drinking Water Safety in San Francisco, a Reservoir of Good Practice. And for item 14, a motion that responds to the civil grand jury's request to provide a status update on the responses to recommendations numbers RA2 and RB1 contained in the 2015 through 16 civil grand jury report entitled San Francisco's Crime Lab Promoting Confidence and Building Credibility, and to urge the mayor to cause the implementation of the accepted recommendations through the development of the annual budget.
Roll call vote.
On items 11, 12, and 14, Supervisor Campos. Campos, aye. Supervisor Cohen. Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell. Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim.
Aye.
Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener.
Aye.
Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos. Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. There are 11 ayes.
Those items are adopted unanimously. Item 13.
Item 13 is a resolution to approve the settlement of the unlitigated claim filed by Darlene Lau against the city for $140,000. The claim was filed on January 22nd, 2015, and involves an alleged personal injury on a city street.
Colleagues, can we take item 13, same house, same call? Without objection, the resolution is adopted unanimously. Item 15 and 16 together, please, Madam Clerk.
Item 15 is an ordinance to amend the planning code to allow temporary homeless shelters in the production, distribution, and repair areas, the Western Soma Mixed-Use Office, and the Service Arts Light Industrial Zoning District, subject to conditional use authorization, to affirm the Planning Department's CEQA determination and make appropriate findings. Item 16 is an ordinance to order the summary vacation of a portion of 25th Street to facilitate construction of a temporary navigation center for homeless residents, authorizing the operation of a navigation center on the vacated portion of 25th Street for more than 2 years, and to affirm the Planning Department's CEQA determination.
Supervisor Kim.
Thank you, President Breed. I will be supporting this item as well as item 16. Our district certainly wants to do our fair share of being able to locate spaces where we can house temporary homeless shelters and navigation centers. I do just want to note that this planning code change allows temporary homeless shelters in the districts that I represent, along with Supervisor Cohen and Supervisor Campos. We are the only 3 districts that have accepted new navigation centers and have been doing our share to answer to the call that we house many of the people that are suffering on our streets. And I want to acknowledge Supervisor Peskin, who has offered a site in his district as well. But we really need to make sure that as we try to address this incredibly important issue, that every neighborhood takes up the call and also looks for sites where we can place more navigation centers. I currently represent almost every single adult shelter in the city, just in the south of Market and the Tenderloin. And while our district is happy to accept those services and to be a refuge and respite, I just also hope that we as a city look to ensure that we have a citywide response and ensure that there are shelters in all of our neighborhoods and that we are all doing our part to address this very important issue.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. Supervisor Cohen.
Thank you, President Breed. I want to agree with what Supervisor Kim just mentioned, and I anticipate Supervisor Campos saying the same thing. I just want to acknowledge that it's been a very long process for both the city and the Dogpatch community, and this includes both the residents as well as the business owners in the area. And I just want to commend the folks that worked hard on putting together the MOU and working with the city. Just as a point of reference for the Dogpatch Navigation Center, the city, specifically the mayor's office, made a recommendation of a site for a potential location, and the neighborhood came back with an alternative site, which is ultimately what we've settled on. So kudos to the neighborhood. I'm pleased that the city has taken up the attitude of working with the people and not against them. Particularly want to call out the leadership within the Department of Homelessness. Also want to recognize the Port, SFPD, as well as Public Works. All of us have worked together closely on this community proposal. And Also want to, again, recognize that the districts 10, 9, and 6 have taken on the role of housing navigation centers, but we need to seriously consider establishing them in every part of the city so that all of our neighborhoods are taking responsibility to manage and address the citywide problem of homelessness. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Cohen. Supervisor Campos.
Thank you, Madam President. Everything that Supervisor Kim and Supervisor Cohen said, I agree with. I just want to share my own experience in the last few weeks. I've had the opportunity to go with the encampment resolution team and going a number of times a week. And, I was out there in the morning yesterday. I was again in the morning today. And the thing about the issue of resolving encampments and getting rid of these tents, which seems like at least there's an agreement that we're all trying to do that, is for the encampments to be resolved, there has to be a place for people to go, and that's where the navigation center comes in. Time and time again, every person that I've spoken to talks about how they want to get into a navigation center.
Yeah.
And it takes, we worked on an encampment around the PG&E parking lot in the Mission, and it took, about 4 weeks for us to actually be able to clear that encampment. But for that to actually happen, there has to be spaces available in navigation centers, and I'm actually terrified that we're going to run out pretty soon. And, we passed a law that says we need 6. Quite frankly, 6 more is not going to cut it. It's not going to be enough. So I agree with Supervisor Cohen, Supervisor Kim. I think that we should have a navigation center in every district at a minimum. I know that we in District 9 right now, even though there is a navigation center on 16th and Mission, we're actually looking for another site because we need more spaces. And so, colleagues, if you're not yet thinking about where in your district you can open up a navigation center, I would ask you to do so. We need the help, and I think that we're not going to resolve this issue unless we have more spaces. And I'm afraid that, especially with the holidays, winter coming, that we're going to run out of spaces pretty soon. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to appreciate the comments of my colleagues, but also talk about Supervisor Campos' legislation for a minute. One of the amendments I did push for in that legislation is to change existing shelters into navigation centers, because I think that, we have possible locations in our shelter system. The Civic Center Hotel, which was a place that helped to house people off the streets, has now become a navigation center. And the point that I'm making, it's not always about identifying new sites. It's also about using our existing homeless shelter system and making it a better system in order to transition the population that we're trying to work with off the streets and into something more permanent and more secure. And so there are a number of shelters in my district. There are a number of programs that exist, both mental health related programs and substance abuse related programs in my district. I am definitely clearly open to working with Jeff Kaninsky on trying to identify one of those locations that are specific shelters in my district to use for that particular purpose. And stop laughing at me for mispronouncing his name again. But I just want to say that, the burden of trying to identify sites cannot solely rest on the shoulders of members of this board. It is important that we collaborate and work with this office in order to develop a plan of action that is going to help us get to the point that we have these particular locations that are going to help us address some of these issues with the folks that we all want to see in a safe and secure place. So thank you all, colleagues, for your comments. And with that, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll on items 15 and 16?
Supervisor Campos. Aye. Campos, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell. Aye. Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Mar, aye. Supervisor Peskin?
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Tang?
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Weiner?
Aye.
Weiner, aye. Supervisor Yee?
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos? Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed?
Aye.
Breed, aye. There are 11 ayes.
Those ordinances pass unanimously on the first reading. Next item, please.
Item 17 is a resolution to urge the establishment of the LGBTQ Nightlife and Culture Working Group and to urge the Office of Economic and Workforce Development and the Entertainment Commission to convene the working group with the goal of protecting, preserving, and expanding LGBTQ nightlife, including the drafting and enacting of a plan to create the citywide LGBTQ cultural heritage strategy.
Colleagues, can we take this item, same house, same call? Without objection, the resolution is adopted unanimously. Madam Clerk, let's go to roll call for introductions.
Supervisor Campos, first up to introduce new business. Re-refer. Supervisor Cohen.
Thank you. Could you? I'm sorry. You're going to have to re-refer me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Supervisor Campos.
Submit.
Thank you. Supervisor Farrell. Okay. Supervisor Kim.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. By now, we have all read the headlines about the outrageous and illegal sale practices of Wells Fargo, one of our major banks here, opening up thousands of accounts for customers who had no idea that their identities and their financial security were being unlawfully used by the very institution that they trusted with their money and their financial health. 5,300 employees were fired, and their CEO got a bonus. Instead of standing up for working people who should be valued as the backbone of their business, Wells Fargo decided to defraud its customers: teachers, nurses, first responders, small business owners, our families, households that already struggle to make it every day. This is becoming an all too common story about a rigged system that benefits those at the very top and leaves everyone else in the dust. And in the wake of this public outcry, the CEO of Wells Fargo will lose his $41 million quote-unquote performance pay, and he won't receive a bonus this year. This is very small comfort for the customers who are defrauded, and I am honored to join Supervisor John Avalos in his resolution that he is introducing later today. My resolution is a little different. We have been working on this issue for several months, and that is the issue of worker to CEO ratio pay. While the average U.S. worker salary has remained stagnant from 1978 to 2014, corporate executive pay has increased by almost 1,000%. In 2014, the CEO to worker pay ratio was 373 to 1. The CEO to minimum wage worker is 774 to 1. What this means is that for every single dollar that a worker earns, a CEO is pocketing $774. In 1 hour at minimum wage in San Francisco, if our workers make $15 an hour, that same CEO is pocketing $11,610 an hour. The Wells Fargo scandal only highlights what we as Americans have been feeling here for decades. If Wells Fargo won't hold its executive officers accountable, even when they legally defraud thousands of people, scapegoat and fire 5,300 line workers, and yet allow their top management to walk away still with millions of undeserved corporate pay, we need to and we will seriously consider what steps we can take to ensure that the prosperity of our city benefits everyone and not just those in top. What can we in San Francisco do to keep these huge, ultra-wealthy corporations like Wells Fargo accountable, not just when they engage in incredibly dishonest behavior, but also since we as a city and county are major investors in all of these companies? Jurisdictions have started taking action by using their might as institutional investors to curb excessive CEO pay. Many San Franciscans may not realize it, but we are big stock owners. Our public pension system holds billions of dollars in publicly traded stock, including investments in major corporations. Big corporations want our business, so it's up to us to use our leverage and our power to ensure that they are being held accountable, transparent, and fair to our workers. I'm introducing a legislation today that directs the San Francisco Employment and Retirement Board to review executive compensation and define what quote-unquote excessive executive compensation is, which should include the total compensation for any individual, not just their take-home pay.
The legislation also asks SFR to create a report of best practices regarding comprehensive evaluation of executive compensation and include a review of the pay ratio between CEO to worker and CEO to minimum wage worker of public companies within the current SFR's portfolio. The findings would be presented publicly and to the Board of Supervisors regarding which companies are in violation of SFR's guideline on excessive pay for top executives of companies in which SFRs own shares. Our San Francisco Employment Retirement Board can use our proxy power to vote against executive CEO pay. In fact, we get a ballot every 3 years that asks us if we will vote to increase pay for corporate executives. Thus far, our practice has not been to vote at all. I'm asking SFRs to re-examine this practice and send a powerful message that our public pensions are a public investment, and we want to invest and support the companies and businesses that do not harm the public by creating greater inequity in CEO to worker pay. Taxpayer dollars shouldn't be underwriting frauds and scams, and certainly should not be increasing the inequity that we are seeing here today. Public pensions, again, are public investment, and we should be supporting the companies and businesses that uphold the very principles here in San Francisco that we on the board often talk about. We might not be able to force criminal penalties on Wells Fargo's leadership, but we can certainly use the tools at our disposals to hold them accountable, along with other large corporations, to get a better deal for American workers. And colleagues, the rest I submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. Supervisor Marr.
Thank you. I was distracted a little bit by the incredible flower arrangements, the dahlias, and other things around us as we celebrated 100 years of the Board of Supervisors and this chamber. Colleagues, today I'm directing the city attorney to work with my office to draft an update to our 2014 plastic water bottle ordinance that was led by Corporate Accountability International and our former colleague, now Assemblyman David Chu, and co-sponsored by a number of us. As you recall, in 2014, our ordinance restricts plastic water bottle sales on city property. It also reduces plastic pollution and moves our city towards a culture of being plastic water bottle free. In the 2 years since the ordinance became law, I have been working with our Rec and Park Department, our Public Utilities Commission, our school district, and many other agencies to expand public access water through drink tap stations and drinking fountains, and we've installed a number of them. I think we'll get up to 100 new ones by the end of this year and many more next year. The plastic water bottle ordinance went into effect in 2014, but on October 1st this year was a major phase-in that helps our city crack down on a leading source of ocean pollution and non-biodegradable landfill waste. However, there are a number of areas that can be strengthened and expanded in the current ordinance to help our city move towards our zero waste goals and reduce the huge volume of plastic water bottles that unfortunately end up in landfills and polluting our marine environment as well. So I'll be working with the city attorney to draft this ordinance, and you'll be able to see it very soon, and we will update, modernize, and strengthen our city's law. Also, I'm introducing a resolution today with the support of Supervisors Aaron Peskin, John Avalos, David Campos, and Jane Kim. Many of you know that many movements are uniting in solidarity at the Dakota Sioux Reservation, the Standing Rock Reservation. There are hundreds of emerging water protectors coming from many communities around this country to take a stand with the people of Standing Rock. And this is about preserving water and life. Many of the activists that have emerged around this movement have used different slogans: water is life, protect our water and natural resources, prevent privatization of water. And in many ways, it's a movement of our time, like Black Lives Matter has been as well. The Dakota Access Pipeline, which many are opposing, would carry as much as 570,000 barrels of fracked crude oil per day from North Dakota's Bakken oil field to Illinois. It's a 1,134-mile pipeline that would run under the Missouri River, posing a serious threat to drinking water and life. The Indigenous Environmental Network and many others are leading frontline direct actions and solidarity visits, peaceful ceremonies, and organizing efforts of Indigenous people and environmental justice advocates throughout this country. Yet the activists and organizers and communities that have been there in solidarity, along with the Standing Rock people, have faced intimidation, excessive force, and many arrests. I urge you to join me and again Supervisors Kim Peskin-Avalos and Campos as we stand in solidarity with Standing Rock Sioux Tribe in opposition to the construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline across ancestral lands, waters, sites of cultural, historical, and religious significance. If you want more information, go to indigenous.uprising.org or sacredstonecamp.org. I also wanted to acknowledge that many San Francisco and Bay Area groups are visiting Standing Rock. In September, Grassroots Global Justice organized a delegation that included many from the Chinese and Asian American communities, from the Chinese Progressive Association to the Asian Pacific Environmental Network and Committees Against Anti-Asian Violence in New York. And I wanted to just acknowledge that the solidarity visits continue and they're very important. Our resolution will put San Francisco on record as a water protector supporting the Standing Rock stand. Also, join me and many of our Richmond District leaders as we green and clean the Richmond. It's a strategy meeting and community meeting on Thursday, October 20th from 6 to 8 p.m. at our Golden Gate Park Senior Center in Golden Gate Park. That's at Fulton and 37th Avenue. I just wanted to give a special shout out to Jean Barish, who's one of our leaders from the Richmond, who I have nominated for our graffiti task force. But she, over the past 10 to 20 years, has been leading efforts to keep our neighborhood green and clean, from KONC, which is Keep Our Neighborhood Clean, and countless efforts in our district. Please join me and Jean and many others from our Community Police Advisory Board, the Department of Public Works, our Richmond District Neighborhood Center, and many others to join us in greening and cleaning our neighborhood. Also, I am joining a number of longtime leaders celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Black Panther Party at the Oakland Museum over the next few days. There's a number of workshops and strategy sessions really supporting youth leadership and others. The gala on Saturday includes not only Danny Glover, Davey D, and many others, but the return of Digital Underground. For those of you that love Tupac and Shock G and many others, it'll be a great gala for the Black Panther Party and the current generations and movements leading the struggles. Also, from Friday to Sunday, I'm joining a lot of intersectionality struggles as the Bioneers Conference reconvenes in San Rafael. Annie Leonard of The Story of Stuff, a great little video about consumption and capitalism, says Bioneers is a hopeful replenishment pit stop on our journey to a better world. In the Bioneers Conference, which is at bioneers.org, you'll see that they create unity with indigenous environmental movements. There's lots of efforts to create youth leaders and to support them, and there's a lot of intersectionality with supporting women's leadership in all of our movements. But please join me and others, Bill McKibben from 350.org, to Tom Goldtooth of the Indigenous Environmental Network, Lisa Hoyos of Climate Parents, Terry Almaguer of Put Air, and I'm just off the top of my head, so many leaders are convening for the intersectionality of our movements, for the environment, for Earth, and protecting our communities. And lastly, please join me in closing this board meeting, this historic board meeting, in the memory of a 108-year-old Richmond District icon, Mrs. Lori Southgate. She lived in the Richmond District for most of her life. And earlier this year, with Meals on Wheels, I visited her along with Ann Quaintance from Meals on Wheels. I remember Ms. Southgate listening to music at her dinner table as her caregiver helped to support her, living in her home for over 60 years in the Richmond District. Her home actually was one of the earthquake shack homes, and she had lived there since 1955. When I met her, the impression of her listening to classical music as she quietly sat at her dinner table in her home it really touched my heart about how aging in place programs keep people in their homes for as long as possible. Her caregiver also was graciously supporting her and helping her stay in her home as well. Ms. Southgate made me proud of our city for developing programs like our Dignity Fund to aging in place programs and our new Support at Home program so that people like Ms. Southgate, 108 years old, can stay in their homes and stay a valuable part of their community. She was born in Fort Thomas, Kentucky to Laura Donnelly and Dr. Frank Southgate, and she was preceded in her death by her parents, Brother James and Sister Nancy. Lori worked for many years also serving our communities as a certified medical records librarian, first in Cincinnati and then in San Francisco at our Children's Hospital and the Langley Porter Clinic at UCSF. She's survived by her cousins on the East Coast and by many local friends of all ages. Ms. Lori Southgate, 108 years of full life. May she rest in peace. The rest I'll submit. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Marr. Supervisor Peskin.
Submit.
Supervisor Wiener.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Today I have the sadness of presenting an in memoriam on my own behalf and on behalf of Supervisor Campos about Wayne Friday, a great leader for many decades in the LGBT community and a confidant of Harvey Milk, who tragically took his own life last week. Wayne, it's hard to even know where to begin with Wayne Friday. He's someone who was in our community for almost 50 years and was one of the group of LGBT people who really gave birth to the modern advent of LGBT people participating in politics fully and the empowerment of our community. He met Harvey early on and helped get Harvey elected to the Board of Supervisors. When Harvey was elected to the Board of Supervisors, Wayne took over Harvey's political column in the Bay Area Reporter, and he played that role for about 30 years. He is someone who was a confidant to many people in public life, including to me, to Senator Mark Leno, to our city attorney, Dennis Herrera, I know he had a great relationship with Supervisor Peskin, with Supervisor Campos. He's someone who he was always available. He would always sometimes just call you and spontaneously express his opinion that what you were doing was great or ridiculous. But he was always there when you needed help or you needed guidance. And I feel very lucky as a gay man of a different generation to have known people like Wayne Friday and Jim Rivaldo and Dick Pavish and Ann Cronenberg and people who really helped to birth our modern movement. And they're sadly passing. And it's a real tragedy to lose Wayne. Wayne his health was deteriorating. He was despondent about the pain that he was in and the deterioration. And he ultimately took his own life. And Wayne, I love you. Many people love you. Our community is diminished by your loss, but I know that you are in a better place and you're watching over us. So rest in peace, Wayne.
Thank you, Supervisor Wiener. Supervisor Campos.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And I just want to echo what Supervisor Wiener has said about Wayne Friday. I think for those of us who started learning about San Francisco politics and getting involved in San Francisco politics, Wayne Friday was, in his column, were a critical part of actually not only politics generally in San Francisco, but especially in the LGBTQ community. So many of us look forward to reading Wayne's column to find out what was going on, and you knew if how relevant or important you were, depending on how Wayne wrote about you, or the fact that he wrote about you at all, or not. It is, as Scott Wiener said, Supervisor Wiener said, he was part of a generation of queer activists who helped the LGBTQ political movement come of age, and Harvey was instrumental in that, but Wayne certainly played a very important role. And it is sad that that generation of folks is, not here with us. Many of them have passed, Jim Rivaldo and Wayne Key among them. What I appreciated about Wayne Friday is the fact that even though we did not always agree, Wayne was very much about making sure that there was LGBT representation in government and elected office. And I know that even though we weren't always on the same page, he supported me at times because it was important for him, for LGBTQ people to have a voice. And, he was very consistent in that way. And he was a remarkable individual. It is sad and tragic how he passed. But I know that he was a very strong person, and at the end of the day, and this is what I appreciated and respected and admired about Wayne, is that he lived his life on his own terms, and he did that till the very end. So rest in peace, Wayne Friday. Thank you for everything you did for people like me and others in my community, in our community. You will be missed, but you certainly left this world a better place.
Thank you, Supervisor Campos. Chair Peskin.
Colleagues, can we make that in memoriam from the entire Board of Supervisors? We'll do that without objection.
Thank you, Chair Peskin. Supervisor Yee, thank you for your indulgence.
No problem. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Again, I just want to reiterate, I will be introducing a resolution to create a task force to look at future police staffing using best practices. This is something I'm working with the police commissioners with in terms of putting the members that would be on the task force. The rest I submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Yee. Supervisor Avalos.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Colleagues, I have two items for introduction. The first is a resolution condemning hate speech targeting Muslims. This was a resolution, or is a resolution that is being replicated in many other cities around the country. Earlier this summer, many of us signed on to a letter condemning anti-Muslim sentiment in the country. And so this is the next step forward. Last week, the city of Austin, Texas had done a similar resolution, and so this is basically done in solidarity with a lot of people around the country through the Local Progress Organization, as well as through the Open Society Foundations. Also, I have another resolution that, I want to thank my co-sponsors for the resolution condemning hate speech against Muslims. Co-sponsors are Supervisor Kim, Supervisor Farrell, Supervisor Cohen, Supervisor Marr, Campos, and Yee. We hope to get to all 11. I'm sure this is something that we can all sign on to and share this with other cities around the country. I'm also introducing a resolution so far with this co-sponsorship of Supervisor Campos and Supervisor Kim. It's a resolution that is setting the city on course to end its business relationship with Wells Fargo Bank. As we've heard in recent news, Wells Fargo Bank has been practicing heavy-handed cross-selling of Wells Fargo products to consumers. This has been done by Wells Fargo workers who have been under tremendous pressure from management and the CEO of Wells Fargo, who John Stump, the CEO, just recently resigned as a result of this scandal. This scandal essentially consists of Wells Fargo employees committing fraud, identity theft, and even forgery of consumers' accounts, often setting up phony bank accounts as well as phony credit cards. Over 2 million bank accounts were set up by Wells Fargo Bank, as well as about 500,000 or so credit cards without the consent of consumers. This latest scandal for Wells Fargo is on the heels of Wells Fargo being caught in its predatory lending practices under the subprime loan crisis. And then as a result of that, Wells Fargo actually was very difficult to work with a lot of households that were impacted by that crisis and not allowing them to modify their mortgages and loans. We know that across California and across the country, the stagecoach of Wells Fargo has left a lot of dust in its wake, and ghost towns as well, like you see in Modesto and Stockton. But even in San Francisco, we've seen that a number of households, especially in the southern part of San Francisco, in the southeast part of San Francisco, mostly African American and Latinos, have lost their homes to the mortgage crisis. We believe that we have to go a step further than just not doing business with Wells Fargo along our cash management. We should also be looking at how we do bond financing with Wells Fargo and the investments that we have in our retirement board with Wells Fargo. So this resolution will call upon the controller to look at our business with Wells Fargo, get a measurement of that. How much are we doing in investments? How much are we doing in our bond financing, our municipal financing program? And then making recommendations of how we might pull out of that. Those relationships. We're also asking the city attorney to investigate if there are other financial institutions that are practicing consumer fraud the way that Wells Fargo was doing with customers in California. We also want to get a sense of how much this is happening in San Francisco. I was talking with the treasurer today, and he met with the CEO of Wells Fargo, who could not actually tell the treasurer, Cisneros, how much this was happening in San Francisco. So it's clear that Wells Fargo is not on top of what was going on. We're also asking the DA to investigate if there are any criminal charges that can be placed against the CEO, former CEO of Wells Fargo, and other Wells Fargo management level staff. And ultimately, based on the findings, we will be making a decision whether to end all business ties with Wells Fargo entirely. Colleagues, this is another measure that I would like to have unanimous support on, and I'm setting for next week's adoption without committee reference. And I believe it's possible to do that because we saw that when the CEO, John Stumpf of Wells Fargo, went before Congress, that Congress can't agree on anything the past few years, but everyone at the Senate committee agreed that Wells Fargo had exceeded the public trust, or exceeded its effort to maintain the public trust and should be penalized. So hopefully, colleagues, you can join me in this effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Avalos. President Breed.
Thank you. Colleagues, today Supervisor Kim and I are requesting a GAO hearing on the outcomes of the work group to re-envision the jail replacement project. For those of you who have not been following this particular issue, this board unanimously passed a resolution at the beginning of this year against building a new jail. And instead of building a new jail, it called for alternatives to incarceration and a greater investment in mental health services and other rehabilitation programs. Yes, jail number 3 and especially jail number 4 at 850 Bryant are not seismically safe. The conditions are horrible. Inmates and workers are at serious risk of getting hurt in the event of a natural disaster. They all need to be in a safe building regardless of their standing with society. We need to do something about it, but we know that building a new jail is not the only answer. Our homeless, most vulnerable, and mentally ill residents need services, not jails. We have a severe mental health problem in San Francisco, and sadly, many of our mentally ill residents are homeless. Those who fall victims to the criminal justice system end up taking up beds at these jail facilities. Sometimes mentally ill individuals who are booked into the jail system cannot stand trial due to their mental state. And as a result, they often end up staying in our jails for longer than they should. The city doesn't have enough psych beds and locked facilities at General Hospital, so they don't have anywhere else to go. We also know that 2/3 of our jail population are people of color, and at one of these working group meetings, someone said it costs less to send a black man to Harvard than it does to send someone to jail, which is really sad. I've seen way too many people from my community, my friends, my family members, end up on the wrong side of iron bars when all they needed was access to services and opportunities. I saw rebuilding the jail as a return to an era of mass incarceration, an era San Francisco is trying to leave behind. We need to invest in access to education, workforce, and housing. Jails has and never will be an answer to the systematic issues our city faces around mental health issues, homelessness, and substance abuse. Instead of building a new jail, the resolution we passed in January asked the city to convene a working group comprised of the Department of Public Health Director Barbara Garcia and, at the time, Sheriff-elect Vicki Hennessy, and also who's been leading the charge on this particular issue is Roma Guy, among many, many others, to come up with an alternative to building the proposed 384-bed jail next to the Hall of Justice, bringing together a variety of criminal justice and mental health experts from the city and the community. The work group has been tasked with developing a plan for the permanent closure of county jails 3 and 4 by identifying strategies for reducing the jail population, including alternatives to incarceration and other programs or policies, identifying effective and humane investments in behavioral health programs for those that may otherwise find themselves incarcerated, reviewing the current state of the city's facilities and identifying what new facilities or facilities are needed, and seeking to maintain San Francisco's eligibility to use state financing to fund the construction or renovation of these facilities. As some of you know, Supervisor Kim and I held a hearing at the Neighborhood Safety Committee meeting last week on another concept paper that proposes creating a behavioral health justice center. That was a separate proposal, and I'm looking forward to learning more about that concept as well. This hearing that I'm requesting today will specifically hear the recommendations from the work group of re-envisioning the jail replacement. A large number of people who have been dedicated to meeting regularly to talk about solutions, as I've described earlier. It's been a accumulation of hours and hours of hard work and collaboration between departments and advocates, and I look forward to the outcomes of this particular hearing. The rest I submit.
Thank you, Madam President. And Supervisor Avalos asked to be referred.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I forgot to mention another piece of legislation that I'm actually reintroducing to be heard next week in Budget and Finance. It's an amendment to our administrative code to prohibit the leasing of public land for the extraction of fossil fuels. I had actually submitted this earlier in the year, but have some slight changes to make to it. Essentially, our climate crisis is we're in the middle of. We're seeing global temperatures have increased dramatically over the past several years, and we're also seeing very dramatic climatic events that are occurring even in our own country, of course, as we see recently with Hurricane Matthew. When it comes down to it, we have more than enough fossil fuel that's in the ground, that's in known reserves, that is in the portfolio of fossil fuel corporations, enough fossil fuel to actually lift the Earth's temperature well above the ability to for human beings and most life to inhabit the planet. And so essentially we need to keep fossil fuel in the ground and not burn it, lest we destroy life on Earth. So we want to make sure that San Francisco, that we can do our part. We actually own land in Kern County, down close to Bakersfield, part of the Kern County oil reserve. That actually reserve, I don't think it's based on San Francisco land, but has actually drifted into the water system that serves the city of Bakersfield. But we want to make sure that San Francisco is actually going to be able to not be part of an industry that is ultimately going to be destroying the planet, and we can convert the land that we have there to other uses. For instance, putting a solar farm in place so we can do our part to create energy to offset what we would be extracting from the ground that would harm the environment. And so this will be heard in Budget and Finance. I want to thank Supervisor Farrell, Chair Farrell, for agreeing to move it next week. And colleagues, this would allow San Francisco to do its part. Other cities around the country are doing this, but the federal government also is contemplating how to remove oil extraction from federal land as well, which is a significant step forward to ensuring that we're not putting more carbon into the atmosphere. The rest I'll submit. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Avalos. And Supervisor Farrell, you asked to be re-referred.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Colleagues, I have one piece of legislation to introduce today. As we've talked about many times before here, internet access has become a fundamental right in today's world, and its importance continues to grow. I want to first of all acknowledge Supervisor Marr for a lot of his work on this area as well. Choice and competition in the market are extremely important parts of this. It does lead to the best service and the lowest prices. Unfortunately, for thousands of our residents and businesses in our city, they actually often lack true choice in picking their internet service provider here in San Francisco. Many of our city's tenants that live in multi-dwelling units, buildings, face multiple barriers or are outright denied their choice of internet service provider. While it's not true for every tenant, the scope of the problem is very alarming. Local internet service providers estimate that hundreds of multi-unit residential buildings representing over 50,000 units face impediments that effectively block service providers from accessing buildings to provide service. Just today, the Chronicle highlighted the stories and attempts of tenants out in the Sunset and Potrero Hill who are trying to get the internet service provider of their choice and were giving the runaround or outright denied. For Kevin in Potrero Hill, the property manager told him that he only had two options and couldn't go with the option of his choice, but he wouldn't tell him why. For Trent in the Sunset, he wanted to acquire gigabit speed internet, we should all be striving towards, but the provider of his choice was told no by his landlord. And when that ISP identified a less invasive way to provide the service, he was again denied. These examples and outright denial should not be happening in our city today. We have a vested interest as a local government to make sure that we have the best internet service possible at the lowest prices for our residents. And while the federal government outlaws owners, landlords, and property managers from entering into exclusive agreements with service providers to provide access, de facto exclusivity agreements and other barriers continue to persist throughout our city. In today's world, in 2016, as we are the innovation capital of the world in the private sector, we still, and it's unfathomable, have over 100,000 San Francisco residents and 14% of our public school families who lack internet service at home. In my opinion, we have to do everything in our power to get residents and students online. And providing more choices and competition in the market is the key to closing our digital divide. And it's key to providing more affordable and higher quality internet service options to our residents and businesses. So today I'm introducing a first-in-the-country local policy that guarantees tenants the right to pick their own internet service provider in all residential and commercial multi-unit dwellings across San Francisco. The ordinance itself firmly establishes the rights of tenants in multi-unit commercial and residential buildings to choose a qualified internet service provider of their choice. It prohibits property owners, managers, and landlords from interfering with the choice of service providers from their tenants and stopping them from denying service providers access to their buildings. Only internet service providers certified by the California Public Utilities Commission will be authorized to provide internet service when requested by a tenant. The policy also establishes parameters and requirements for how and when qualified ISPs can provide services to multi-unit buildings. It requires advance notice in writing about a tenant's request. It requires that ISPs work with property owners to conform to reasonable conditions to protect the safety, functioning, and appearance of the property and the well-being of other tenants. And ISPs will have to agree before gaining access to pay for any damages and the reasonable rent for any usage of utility closets and the like. Again, I strongly believe that internet access has to be viewed as a fundamental right in today's world, and there's no reason tenants in San Francisco should be limited in their choice of internet service providers. If we as a city are going to provide a leg up for our residents, especially those most in need, we need to be advocating for and implementing policies that give consumers true choice. San Francisco residents, we all have a vested interest in local laws which increase competition and ultimately deliver the highest quality internet service at the lowest cost. As this policy moves through the legislative process, I do look forward to working with all internet service providers and property owners and groups to make this policy as successful as it can be. And I do want to thank our city attorney, as well as my staff, in particular Jess Montejano, for working on this to date, and the rest I submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Farrell. Madam President, that concludes the introduction of new business.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Can you please read public comment?
At this time, the public may address the entire Board of Supervisors for up to 2 minutes on items within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Board, to include the minutes and items on the adoption without reference to committee calendar. Items 20 through 24. Public comment will not be allowed when an item has been previously subject to public comment by a Board committee. Pursuant to the Board's rules, direct your remarks to the Board as a whole, not to individual supervisors nor to the audience. Speakers using interpretation assistance will be allowed twice the amount of time to testify. And if you would like a document to be displayed on the overhead projector, please clearly state such and remove the document when you would like the screen to return to live coverage of the meeting.
Thank you. First speaker, please.
أيها الإخوة العرب، اسمي عبد الله مجاهد، وأنا هنا اليوم لأذكركم إن غدا أو بكرة بمعنى أصح واجب علينا إننا ننتظر ونشوف المناظرة الموعودة ما بين الجمهوريين وما بين الديمقراطيين. يعني باختصار، واحد طويل اللسان بيكره المسلمين والسود حتى اللاتيني والحريم. هو كان فاكر إنه بفلوسه يقدر يشتري أصواتنا. حتى بغلطاته بيرفض إنه يعتذر. وأنا كمان أرفض إن أديله صوتي وصورته في أغلب الجرايد. 12 سيدة أمريكية تحرش بيهم وبينكر اللي عملوا معاهم. وأنا كأمريكي من أصل مصري أصمم بمحاكمته واستدعاء زوجته الأولى والثانية علشان يورونا حقيقة أسباب طلاقهم منه. يا خسارة، فلوسه ما قدرتش تشتري زوجاته ولا حتى حد من جنبه. وأحب أعرف إيه نوع المخدرات اللي بياخدها هو تخليه ينسى يوم التصويت من 8 نوفمبر. هو قال يوم 28 نوفمبر. يعني هو فين؟ هو عايز يرجعنا تاني؟ وعموما أنا عارف إن زوجته الثالثة إن شاء الله هتطلب منه الطلاق قريب. عارفين ليه؟ لأنه وعدها إنها تدخل البيت الأبيض، وعمرهم ما يدخلوا البيت الأبيض، لا هو ولا هي. وإن شاء الله القرشين اللي هي تاخدهم منه هي أولى بيهم. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Abdullah Mujahid, and I am here today to remind you that tomorrow is the best day we're supposed to be around the TV and we watch the final and the third debate between the Democrat and the Republican. We need to see what the criminal guide is going to say, as you see here now. And I would like to let you know, he insulted 12 women. He put his hand or anything else to bother them. And he denied. If he denied, I want to ask that he must go to the court and we must bring the first wife, the second wife as witness and to let us why they divorced him. By any way, you're going to ask me what I am going to vote. I vote already, and that's the one I vote for him. You can see here. I vote for the person I can trust, the person who give me and who contact me with all the letters they sent it to me. From Obama, from her daughter, from Barack Obama, ask me to continue to support her because they
Abdullah, I'm pausing your time.
Leader, okay.
There is no electioneering in the chamber, no visual or audible displays of support for candidates that have qualified for the ballot.
Okay.
Are we good on this,
Thank you very
Abdullah?
much. I said what I can say because tomorrow is an important day for every one of us, include you. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Hi there. I'm Janine Jacob, and I am not affiliated with anybody. I am a mom who lives on Portero Avenue. I'm homeowner with my husband, and I have a 3-year-old son. And I've also lived in San Francisco for 20 years, since I was a young little optimistic person. The reason why I'm here today is because, I really thank you for all the work that you've done with, trying to get action for the homeless population of our city. But like as it was been addressed earlier today, that that our neighborhoods are taking the brunt of the crisis, and we really need to do everything that's humanly possible. I mean the navigation centers that are coming up, the pipeline are great, but we need a lot more. My son is like passing by these tents, and he thinks it's normal to just walk past them, and other kids too. We went to Franklin Square Park the other day, and there was someone sleeping in the sandbox. There was drug deals going on. There was. And then we tried to go to Jackson Square Park, and then there was a homeless man in the play structure. And my son, he goes to school in Bayview, and it's every day we just see it all the time. And I don't know where else to go. And it just is all the moms and all the dads in our.
Thank you. Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Yes. The person from Bayview, I've had a very hard time. I had a hard time getting there, and I've been attacked and discriminated against. That's why it took me so long to get back. David Sabel, the minute I brought up the fact that I had been discriminated against from getting in the housing right next door to my church. I was harassed and bullied by David Sabel, the San Francisco Housing Director, CEO, a young white man. And I filed lawsuits per se, and I just settled, but the judge let me know there was no money, because there's never any money no matter what happens to poor black people. If you don't have money to pay for something, your rights are all undermined. But I'm still going to be fighting. Last night I had the privilege of going to the meeting right across the street from here, the community town hall sponsored by Carolyn Tyler from KGO TV, and the homeless advocate lady, I think her name was Jackie, she was the moderator, and they had a host of people that was there speaking, and it was so good to hear what my experiences being validated. And this is not my first time with discrimination. I was discriminated against at my job when my children was small, and I lost my job after being fired 3 times and harassed. And I feel so sorry when I hear about the man killed himself, because when I started going to Kaiser for psychiatrists, I was called in every day, because when you sign that paper for your job, the employee can have access to your record. They use my records from the psychiatrist to harass me every day after I'd seen the psychiatrist. It was all I could do to hold on, because I had 4 young children that I was trying to raise. I've lost my 2 older children.
Thank you, ma'am.
My oldest daughter passed
Thank you, ma'am. Your time is concluded. Ma'am, your time is concluded.
Well, I want to say one thing about all of us women.
Next speaker, please.
About being harassed, like what is happening, being
Ma'am, your time is concluded. Madam President.
Ma'am, I'm sorry. If you could hold off, we have to allow public comment to continue. So if you can step to the side and let us finish. We need to finish. We need to give everyone the same equal amount of time. I do apologize. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'll come back and I'll talk a little bit of.
Next speaker, please.
Alex Jones promised to interview Kathy O'Brien, who says she's been raped by Hillary Clinton. I believe she's a credible witness. I know when Stan Monteith, I was cleaning his carpet, he was on RadioLiberty.com, and he sold Kathy O'Brien's books, Access Denied for Reasons of National Security and Transformation of America. And it's going to hopefully be on tomorrow so Donald Trump can slam dunk Hillary. Donald Trump admits to committing adultery, I guess. You know, he did it, you know, but which is worse, raping people or committing adultery? You know, anyone, all of us agree rape is much more evil. Okay, that's a fact. And, you know, Hillary Clinton protected a child rapist that raped this 12-year-old girl so violently that she was put in a coma for 4 days, and she laughed about how it would forever destroy her faith in lie detector tests because she knew he was guilty. And she laughed. Hannity brought that out very well last week, Sean Hannity. And I know this. Jesus said, "This is the will of him that sent me, that everyone which sees the Son and believes on him may have everlasting life, and I'll raise him up on the last day." And I can't help but think that that might be December 1st, which might be the last day of the Sabbath year. I know it'll be 7,560 days from when the Jubilee began and 7,560 days from when the times of the Gentiles ended. But will it be the last day? If it is, you're all going to be in hell on December 1st. And, you know, Jesus Christ resurrected out of the grave, okay? He's the only Savior. He's the only Savior there is. He's the only man in history that ever appealed to prophecies written down about him before he was born. Behold, we go up to Jerusalem, and all things that are written by the prophets concerning the Son of Man will be accomplished. For he shall be...
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Andrew Yip, Chinatown Missionary Officer. Man live on this world having good bearing of self-nature from heaven. One is ultimately good. One turns bad only because of the contamination by later in life of muddy obstacles. Of heavenly true self come to loss of downfall, not knowing of return back to the origin. How sad. For having give everyone with a heavenly self-nature, then everyone bears with one's heavenly destiny in one's heart and body. When we can know of self-nature, we can know of heavenly way, of which one could achieve only by way of internal cultivation, of meditation, or being quiet. Then one can know of one's destiny. One can secure one's destiny. One can establish one's destiny. Beyond one's self-nature, there will not be holiness. By applying of one's self-nature, that is the holy way. For holy way exists within one's heart. The cultivation for holiness would be the work for heart in self-observance. The inner cultivation of one's heart in nourishment reflects of one's heavenly self-nature. Heaven and earth exist within one's heart. That can extend to the six sides of the universe and can fall up to conceal in secret. From heaven to man, one should know of complete accomplishment of humanity in daily matters. Then one can, having good accordance to heavenly principle in reasoning with one's heavenly self-nature and in knowing of one's heavenly destiny. God bless Holy Mission. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Thank you, President Breed and all the little carbon gluttons. My name is Christopher Dahl, and I live at 6th and Howard, 10 blocks and less than 40 years from sea level. I rise to comment on the Paris Agreement. This is the climate plan ratified this month at the United Nations. It sets out the goals for limiting human carbon uploads so that global warming is held to a maximum and negative impacts are held to a minimum. This month, Kevin Anderson and Glenn Peters published an assessment of these goals in the journal Science. They state, the Paris Agreement requires that anthropogenic greenhouse gas emission sources and sinks, that's upload and download, are balanced. By the second half of this century, they note that the most prominent models of the path to achieve this, generally characterized as bioenergy plus carbon capture systems, include the deployment of biofuel generation systems, that's ethanol, which remove usable land covering twice the size of India from food production. They also note that some of the national emission pledges submitted to the Paris negotiations lead to an increase in emissions at least until 2030. They close saying, negative emission technologies are not an insurance policy, but rather an unjust and high-stakes gamble. There is a real risk they will be unable to deliver on the scale of their promise. I will close by noting that although I have proposed the development of new technologies for carbon-free generation of electricity and for the efficient desalination of water, these systems have their own economic value and have independent drivers for development and deployment. Using free energy to make fresh water to irrigate new trees will achieve world carbon balance. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Again, I want to recognize that this is Domestic Violence Month and take a second for all the survivors, the children, the families that are destroyed by this kind of violence. It's horrible, it's sickening, but let me just tell you about my own personal journey with domestic violence. As a gay man, I was choked by my partner. I reported to the police, he was arrested. Because I filed charges against him, he turned into an insane lunatic. It's the best way I can describe it. I made tens and tens and tens of reports. The police department helped me as much as they could, but actually the laws can only help so much when you're dealing with a person on domestic violence. You talk to people, their eyes kind of glaze over when you're telling them you're in a domestic violence situation because people feel powerless. Yes, CUAV, Community United Against Violence, did help me prepare some legal documents. San Francisco Women Against Rape helped me prepare legal documents. And my own resources. Wayne Friday actually did intervene and help me tremendously because he felt that domestic violence on same sex should be held accountable in parity with domestic violence on opposite sex. But that was not enough. I had to move, again, relocated to Texas for 2 years. It was a horrible, horrible, horrible situation. But when I hear that other people in this chamber support people that are batterers, like Julius, and again, I will not say his name, Turman, who is an official, a police commissioner, and yet Scott Wiener was also a person who was part of the Alice B. Toklas president, so was Julius. So you have to ask yourself, who are the hypocrites in this chamber that go against one perpetrator of domestic violence and yet protect the other? Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Tom Gilberti. 40 to 60% of police activity now is involved with mental health, homeless, addictions. We need crisis intervention teams. We need basically people I call saints, health practitioners to direct these people to clinics, hospice, hostels, safe harbors where they're not re-dumped on the street. Wells Fargo took $6 a month from me because they signed me up for internet. I have never been on the internet. Dealing with Wells Fargo, we need a San Francisco public bank. That needs to come back again. Yesterday, I was at the Land Use and Transportation. I'd like to apologize. I spoke for 1 minute and 40 seconds or something, prattled on. I should have said Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and get whatever you can, and good luck. And this is a wonderful room that's 100 years old, and tomorrow I'm going to be 66. It's a nice place to have become a public citizen. I think reality can work with the situation in our city right now, encouraging a healthy, sustainable equilibrium for all people. Refugees have been in the news. We've got refugees from Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, all the states America's doing a big involvement with. But yet when you go outside and you see the homeless on our streets, these are refugees from the American political and capitalistic society. We need to take care of our people here. They have broken minds, they have broken lives, they need help. Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Madam President, my name is Otto Duffy. I'm a resident nearby to City Hall here. I appreciated hearing the numerical information about the ratio of CEO pay to the lowest workers' pay. I guess I typically hear the number 400 to 1 a lot. It's a pretty high number. My mind kind of grasps things like that, mathematical ideas. The one that came up to me today that I think I've said before, and it always strikes me, is that approximately 99.5% of our 900,000 people that sleep in our city every night sleep under some kind of shelter or some kind of security, some kind of appropriate conditions. And yet, in 40 years since the homelessness issue became a problem in the late 70s, in the 40 years, we have not been able to close the gap on that last 1/2 of 1%. So that's the issue.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to address the Board of Supervisors? Seeing none, Madam President.
Ma'am, I'm sorry, you had an opportunity to speak. At this time, public comment is now closed. Well, ma'am, we'll have to address you after the meeting, after we're done with our business. Thank you. Thank you. All right, Madam Clerk, can you call the items for adoption without reference to committee?
Items 20 through 24 are being considered for immediate adoption without reference to committee. A single roll call vote may enact these items. A member may object, have an item severed, and consider it separately.
Supervisor Kim?
24.
Supervisor Cohen? Madam Clerk, on the remaining items, can you please call the roll?
Madam President, I think we should sever 22 since item 23 is connected to it.
Correct.
Okay. On the items 20 and 21, can you please call the roll?
Supervisor Campos. Campos, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell. Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener. Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos. Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. There are 11 ayes.
The resolutions are adopted unanimously. So would you like us to call 22 and 23 together?
I'm just going to be speaking on item 23.
Okay. Call item 22, please.
Madam President, because the outcome of item 22 is reliant on item 23, we should take 23 first.
Okay. Call 23, please.
Great.
Item 23 is a motion to schedule the Board of Supervisors to sit as a committee of the whole on November 1st, 2016 at 4 p.m. in a joint meeting with the San Francisco Police Commission to hold a public hearing to consider the findings and recommendations of the Department of Justice initial assessment report of the San Francisco Police Department.
Supervisor Cohen.
Thank you. So, not to be duplicative, I'm just proposing a simple amendment to Supervisor Campos' original motion to include reporting not only on the Blue Ribbon panel, but also the recent reports with all of the findings and recommendations that have recently come out in an effort to improve our police department. These incidents and reports on the Blue Ribbon panel, this also includes the Department of Justice initial assessment report, as well as the President Obama's task force on 21st century policing and a civil grand jury report. So all of this information is very valuable, and we should not only consider the findings from one report, but we should actually be in lockstep with the Police Commission when it comes to reforming our police department and evaluating all the findings from the reports. So there are a few changes as follows that I'd like to read into the record. First, as I stated, I want to include updates from the police department on the findings from all the reports. Second, change the date of the committee of the whole hearing. This is largely due because the Police Commission will be holding their own special meeting on November 1st to discuss the hiring of our new chief. Third, and finally, I have also added a request to convene a joint hearing between the Board of Supervisors and the Police Commission on the 15th of November at 4 p.m. to hear the first update and to discuss with all of our police commissioners jointly the reforms to our department and to receive a comprehensive update on the work that's being done to date. Furthermore, I'd like to also amend item 23 to reflect the proposed amendments that I have outlined above and holding the joint meeting between the Board of Supervisors and the Police Commission on November 15th.
So just to be clear, Supervisor Cohen, you'd also like to amend the title as well to read...
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
so
thank
Supervisor Cohen has made amendments. Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Campos. Colleagues, can we take the amendments without objection? The amendments pass unanimously. Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to rise to a point of information, which is that I believe the 1515 South Van Ness item is proposed for continuance to November the 15th at 3 p.m., and that item may go well beyond 4 p.m., so I just thought I should throw that out there as a scheduling matter.
Thank you. Supervisor Cohen, would you like to amend the time of the meeting to accommodate the possibility that that could be problematic for people who are going to be waiting?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to amend it to 5 p.m.
Okay.
Thank you.
Supervisor Cohen has made a motion to amend it to 5 p.m., seconded by Supervisor Campos. Colleagues, can we take that without objection? Without objection, we will meet as a committee. Well, we will amend this to 5 o'clock for November 15th. And on the item as amended, colleagues, can we take this item, same house, same call? Without objection, this item passes as amended unanimously. Item number 22.
Motion to direct the clerk of the Board of Supervisors to schedule committees of the whole hearings on the first regular meeting of the Board of Supervisors each month from November 2016 to January 2017 to hear and receive an update on the final report, findings, and recommendations of the Blue Ribbon Panel on Transparency, Accountability, and Fairness in Law Enforcement.
Supervisor Campos, did you want to make comments or make any amendments in light of this joint meeting for this particular item?
Just a question to the city attorney. Do we need to make amendments to reflect the changes that were incorporated into item 23?
Deputy City Attorney John Gibner, you basically just need to amend the date,
okay.
and that's enough.
So just quickly make a motion to amend along those lines.
Okay. So do we want to specify, we want to remove November, and since we're speaking to the quarters in particular, do we want to say effective in the next quarter, which would be February of 2017? Does that make sense, Mr. Gibner?
I didn't catch it. So you want to
remove the November date because it's already included, and then to reflect that it's a quarterly hearing.
Okay.
February. Okay.
So is that clear? And that would commence in February 2017. Okay.
Madam President, then we need a different motion because we have to January 2017, which means if we're striking November, then we're still meeting in December. We would start with the month of December.
In the resolution, it's my understanding that it starts with the month of, it starts with the month of December or November?
It starts with November.
November and then February. Right, because it's quarterly.
Right, so we would strike
Let's
as
strike
well
December and January.
Okay.
Okay. And commence in February of 2017.
That's
okay. So Supervisor Campos has made the amendment. Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Farrell. Colleagues, can we take that without objection? Without objection, the amendment passes. And on the item as amended, can we take that same house, same call? Without objection, the motion is approved as amended unanimously. Item 24.
Item 24 is a motion to adopt the Planning Department's report on the interim zoning moratorium to prohibit the conversion or replacement of production, distribution, and repair uses in the proposed central south of Market Plan area.
Supervisor Kim.
Colleagues, back in 2014, as part of a compromise resolution on Proposition K, which many of you know as housing balance, one of the agreements was to pass a temporary moratorium on conversions of PDR uses in the Central Soma area over the course of roughly 2 years. As many of you know, as an interim control, this cannot be continued. When we made this agreement in 2014, there was tremendous concern about the rapid loss of production, distribution, and repair. This is long before we placed Proposition X on the ballot. And over the last 5 years, the city has lost 970,000 square feet of PDR in the south of Market, Mission, Potrero, and Dog Patch neighborhoods. This moratorium is now coming to an end, and we don't have a central SOMA plan in place. As a requirement of the temporary moratorium, the Planning Department does submit a report to the Board of Supervisors. Now, the central SOMA plan began in 2011. Over the course of 6 years, the Planning Department was tasked with coming up with a plan that would help preserve and protect production, distribution, and repair in the Central Soma Area Plan. The report that we got today simply wrote, quote, "The department is recommending that the issues outlined in the ordinance be addressed via the Central Soma Plan." I just don't think that this is an adequate response from the Planning Department, and I urge my colleagues to vote against this report. The Planning Department clearly has many more recommendations that it can enlist on how we can support the use of PDR in our planning area. I'm actually very disappointed to see this one-sentence recommendation on a report that really requires much, much more work, and which we have actually worked on for the last 6 years. So, colleagues, I do ask for your vote no on this item. I'd like the Planning Department to come back with a real report with real recommendations that I know that it's actually working on. Thank you, colleagues.
So would you like to make a motion to table this item?
Sure. We can also do a motion to table.
Okay. Supervisor Kim has made a motion to table, seconded by Supervisor Campos. Colleagues, can we take that motion without objection? Or, Madam Clerk, would we need a roll call vote?
You can take it without objection.
Okay. Thank you. Without objection, this item has been tabled unanimously. Madam Clerk, what's
Yes.
next?
Today's meeting will be adjourned.
Madam Clerk.
There's an imperative item.
Oh, okay.
Madam Clerk, I have an imperative item.
You do? Okay.
Oh, okay. So I don't have an imperative item in my... Hold on. Where is it?
Ezra Report Day.
Okay, Supervisor Marr.
Thank you. The language was...
I'm sorry, Madam President, I have to read the item first. It's a resolution declaring October 18th, 2016 as Ezra Report Day in the City and County of San Francisco.
Okay. Supervisor Marr.
Thank you. And my understanding is that the clerk's office submitted the language to everyone earlier in this meeting or in the celebratory meeting. This is a very simple measure, and I declare that this is purely commendatory, and I also declare that that we need to take immediate action to declare today, October 18, 2016, as a Report Day, as the longtime director of the Association of Bay Area Governments for his leadership as we move the Bay Area forward. I urge support for this item. So I move that this is purely commendatory, and I move that we need to take action immediately today.
Okay, so Supervisor Marr has made a motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Yee. Colleague, can we take that without objection? Without objection, motion's passed. And I will now open this item up to public comment. If there are any members of the public who'd like to speak to the imperative item specifically, seeing none, public comment is now closed. And on the imperative item itself, colleagues, can we take that same house, same call? Without objection, the imperative item passes unanimously. Madam Clerk, please read the in memoriams.
Thank you, Madam President. Today's meeting will be adjourned in memory of the following beloved individuals. On behalf of Supervisor Marr, for the late Miss Lori Southgate. On behalf of Supervisor Peskin, for the late Mr. Richard Specs Simmons. At the suggestion of Supervisor Wiener and Campos, and on behalf of the entire Board of Supervisors, for the late Mr. Wayne Friday.
Okay, colleagues, this brings us to the end of our agenda. Madam Clerk, is there any other business before us today?
That concludes our business for today, Madam President.
Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.